he has the power to actually hold souls and help bring them back, then is Shadow of Death not foreshadowing for him, but is it foreshadowing for like his purpose or something that he is going to do? Which I think fits very nicely with what we have been given about Thunderbirds so far.
I think that also works with the idea of Thanatos being one of his parents, right? Because Thanatos is death. I'm just going to put this out into the universe, and there's no shot it's going to happen, but I'm going to put it out there. My current casting vote for Zayden is Jude Bellingham, hands down. You watched this game. I know you watched this game. The soccer player.
Yeah, he's a soccer player.
I know. That's why it's not going to happen. However.
Yeah, I mean, I have shed tears several times over the World Cup in the last 48 hours.
I've cried every game. I mean, I fell asleep for Argentina, but
after the game when they are singing their songs. Not really during the game, to be honest. During the game, I'm just like in the game.
I'm so in it. And we only have Peacock. So my only way to watch these games is via Telemundo in Spanish, which is just like so fun. Like I'm not catching any of the Spanish, but like the emotion and the energy of the announcers is like so fun. So every game is just like such a like heightened experience for me. I'm like, oh my God, let's go. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has been, I don't ever remember loving the World Cup as much as I'm loving the World Cup right now. It's been so fantastic. And I think I'm planting my flag for England of the 4 teams left. I'm like pretty in love with Jude Bellingham at this point. So like, I think I'm going for England. And I don't know anything about World Cup soccer. I want to be clear. So if you guys are no, England sucks, that's fine. The World Cup's going to be over by the time you hear this anyway. So we will know.
I shouldn't say typically because I'm just nowhere near loyal enough of a football fan, soccer fan enough to have like a team. But I find myself often rooting for England just because I have enough linkage to England that I'm like, this feels appropriate. and the US is like, when the US performs, of course, I'm going to root for the US. But as soon as they're out, I'm like, all right.
Yeah, the only US game I caught was the US-Belgium game. And they looked or was it Belgium?
I mean, that would have been the one they lost.
So. The one they lost. Yeah. And they just looked. I was like, oh, guys, like, I'm so proud of you for getting this far, but I think this is not our sport at the end of the day. And I would love it if it were our sport. I would love it. Yeah. But right now, it does not feel like a national priority, unfortunately, which I think is a shame. But yeah, it's a great sport.
I was watching the interview with England's coach after the game, and I was like, ooh. That's such a stark contrast to how I felt watching the team singing Wonderwall.
I didn't watch it. What did he say?
Oh, he was very upset. He was like, that was not a good game for us. We did not play well. We did not perform well. We got very lucky. It was not good. We need to get better. I was like, okay.
Well, that's how I felt when they played Mexico too, if I'm being honest. Again, not a sports fan. Well, I am a fan of sport in general, but I am not an in-depth soccer football fan, you know?
Yeah.
But when they played Mexico, I also felt like, I'm like, wow, they won, but like, I was like, oh my God, they're so lucky they won this game. They should have lost this game, but they did win. And then they won the next one. So I guess they're just the luckiest team in the world. I know there's been accusations of the cup being rigged for them. I'm not going to dive into that. That seems like full conspiracy theory, but they do seem to be getting very lucky.
Yeah, I'm not educated.
No, I'm not educated enough
at all, even a little bit. But I can see where the coach was coming from. I mean, they went into overtime. So it was not a dominant game by any stretch. I have no idea how much they were projected to win by, if at all. If they were supposed to beat Norway, then yeah, I would be disappointed as well if I were the coach, if I strung the game out into overtime for a victory.
I think they were. I think they did say that on Telemundo that Norway was not supposed to win this game. Like England was projected to be way better, but my Spanish is rusty, so I don't know if that's actually what they said. But yeah.
Yeah, but I should be doing better in terms of following this World Cup, but I have so much reading to do.
There's only 3 games left. I know. My reading it's gone off a cliff. I've barely been reading. It's not been great, but it's fine. Yeah. There's only one World Cup every 4 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that's not true. There's 2, because the Women's World Cup, I did forget about the Women's World Cup.
One Men's World Cup every 4 years. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And the Women's World Cup is much more exciting for the US, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be following the Women's World Cup. I love the Women's World Cup. It's the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fun.
All right. Should we just get into it? Hi, I'm Abby.
I'm Ronnie.
And this is Dragons in the Details, the podcast that helps you better understand your favorite fantasy books through a series of deep dive episodes. This season, we are covering Crescent City. Disclaimer, these episodes will contain Crescent City and ACOTAR spoilers, all 8 published books as of July 2026. If you have read Crescent City, you know why we're doing it that way. Another disclaimer, this podcast is rated R. These are spicy books. We use spicy words. We do tend to curse. These next 2 episodes also, I think, are going to be especially spicy. There's going to be a lot of talk of sex scenes, so maybe earmuff your children. I know some of you listen with your kids, but maybe not these 2. Each week, we dive into a specific topic in depth. This week, we are diving into the most powerful test tube baby on Midgard, Hunt Athalar.
I stand by that statement.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like, you know what? Yeah, we'll stand by it. Special note. So if you guys have been with us for a little while, you know, last 2 weeks, we did our Bryce Quinlan deep dives. This is our Hunt deep dive. And then next week, we are going to do, which is for us this afternoon, but for you guys next week, we are doing a Hunt Bryce Asriel special. And I want to be clear, guys, because I've seen some murmuring on social media. It is not a we are now team Bryce Reel episode. This is a let's look at the theory and examine the facts, because this theory gets a lot of traction. I will tell you right now, spoiler, I am still firmly in the camp that Hunt and Bryce are mates. I just want to put that out there. That doesn't mean I don't think there aren't some things to talk about with Hunt and Bryce and Asriel and their relationships to each other. So that's a little teaser for next week. We're not doing that this week. This week, we are focusing on Hunt. So if you don't hear any questions specifically about whether Bryce and Hunt are mates this episode, that's because we're going to talk about it in the next episode. We come with receipts. We have quotes to back up our theories, so you can follow along if you're skeptical. Ronnie, do you want to do announcements?
Yes. So deep dive music, as always, is brought to you by Schwoodley, SCHWOODLEY. If you like our deep dive music, check them out on Spotify. And probably most exciting announcement of the week, we are officially on Patreon. So if you want to support us there and watch exclusive content, if you've seen our Dragons After Dark episodes, that is now available to you on Patreon. We're very excited about it. There are a few membership tiers that you can peruse and see what fits. We have varied levels of perks, ad-free listening, written content, and a member exclusive show, Dragons After Dark, where we cover books that aren't these. We read other stuff too. We watch other stuff. We want to talk about other stuff. So we've got a show exclusive to subscribers that covers all of those things. So we're on Patreon. Very excited about it. We'll link it in the show notes, and all of our stuff will be there. So if you subscribe at any tier, you can watch all of the Dragons in the Details content on Patreon.
Yep. You guys have been asking for written content diagrams for a long time now. That's going to be on Patreon. We're doing our best to get that to you guys on Patreon. So if you're looking for that stuff, that is where it's going to be.
Yes. Yep. So we talk about a lot. We know it's a lot. We know it's a lot to come back and like listen through stuff too, if you want to go back and revisit something. So we're doing our best to make it easier to come back to a theory if you would like to revisit that theory that we've discussed, all of that good stuff. So that's up there. Very exciting. And then as always, we this season, and probably future seasons, but certainly this season, are doing fun questions from you. So submit your fun questions to us through DM on social media, through the contact form on our website. You guys have been submitting them in the comments, particularly on YouTube. I see you YouTube commenters. You are submitting a lot of fun questions. I love them. So yes, submit your fun questions. If you want us to read them on the podcast, they should be about ACOTAR and Crescent City. We are not doing Throne of Glass spoilers up front in these episodes, so try to make them ACOTAR and Crescent City focused, please. We love your fun questions. They're the best. I think that's it for me on announcements. Anything else?
Nope, I don't think so.
Cool. All right, back to you.
All right, so next we have one of those fun questions that we just referenced. So this one is from Dalton Smithy on YouTube. And the question is, what is your favorite series of the 3 SJM series, favorite book of the series, and favorite moment/character? Make it spoiler free, though. Are we allowing Throne of Glass in here?
Or if it's spoiler free, I think.
Yeah, high level.
High level. Spoiler free is fine. So my favorite series, it's hard. I think if I had to pick a favorite series, I do think it would be Throne of Glass, just based on what I tend to gravitate back to. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, right? Like I did. So to be clear, I did prep an answer to this, but I just want to talk about it for a second. It's interesting because I don't know that I would necessarily say that Throne of Glass in its entirety is my favorite series. Like if I had to read an entire series of it, I would probably want to read ACOTAR, to be honest with you. Like I would want to read the 5 books of ACOTAR and I would find that like comfortable and comforting. But my favorite book of everything Sarah J. Maas has written is hands down, and you could probably guess this at this point, Heir of Fire. I would read Heir of Fire quarterly if I had the time. Like, and I probably do, honestly, by accident. So like if I had to answer this in a I'm like picking logical answer, I would say it's Throne of Glass, it's Heir of Fire, and then again, this is spoiler free, but I'm just gonna say the burnout scene, and I'll just leave it there. If you know, you know.
Don't know what you're talking about right now.
When the
In
female
Heir of Fire
character burns out, and then someone sees her back.
Okay.
You need
There's
to
a
read Heir
couple
of Fire more.
burnout scenes. There's a couple burnout scenes.
What is the other burnout scene in Heir of Fire?
There's well, I didn't know it was an Heir of
Both
Fire.
burnout scenes. If that's the other burnout scene you're referring to, great. Either one of those could qualify. So that would be my logical answer. But if I'm allowed to break things up, then I would probably say ACOTAR is my favorite series to read in its entirety. Heir of Fire is still the favorite book, and I would still say the burnout scene is my favorite moment. But what is yours?
I would say ACOTAR is my favorite of the 3 series. It was the first one I read. And I think if A Court of Silver Flames had not been written, if she had ended it at ACOWAR, I don't know that I would quite feel the same way. But I think because she not only with Silver Flames expanded the point of views, right? So we are no longer just in Feyre's head. We have Cassian and we have Nesta. And she upped the lore so much. She upped the world building so much in that book that to me, I mean, I'm not counting Frost and Starlight, but like to me, that really like continued the series and showed me that it was going in an awesome direction. So I would say my favorite series is ACOTAR. But I would say I go back and forth on this one, but like I love Silver Flames so much. But if I'm really being honest, I do think Mist and Fury might be my favorite book of that series because it is just so good. I mean, that's really all there is to say. It is so good.
On first read, Mist and Fury is like brain chemistry altering.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Like I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep for Silver Flames either, but like I really didn't sleep for Mist and Fury. Like it hooks you so well. And there's never like, I think, and whether like, I could go on and on about this for so long, but like Mist and Fury so focused on Rhys and Feyre, whereas Silver Flames, you are focused on Cassian and Nesta, but you get both of their POVs. So you know how they feel about each other, even if they're not being completely honest with themselves. And we have lore building and world building because obviously she wanted to start building up for the crossover that we get in Crescent City. And I love that. But I think because Mist and Fury, we are just so focused on that one story and you only get Feyre's POV and you don't know what's going on in Rhys's head. To me, I think that just elevates it slightly more, even though I love Silver Flame so much. So we'll call it Mist and Fury by a hair for that. Yeah. And then see, this is where I'm going to go back and forth again. My favorite character, I would still say, is Cassian, though. Like even after loving Mist and Fury, I would still say my favorite character is Cassian. Like I just love him. I just love him to death. I just think he's the best one. Yeah, I don't know. I think those are my answers.
I think that those are good answers. Yeah.
Apparently, I can't make decisions.
No, but I think it's fair. I think within ACOTAR, I have the same wrestling, right? I do think ACOWAR is underappreciated. I think on reread, I was like, I underappreciated ACOWAR. However, A Court of Silver Flames changed the series. It completely changed the series. And so in that sense, yeah, that might make it the best book, but like the best book to read to me, as far as like how it made me feel, was probably slightly ACOMAF. Yeah.
We've also gotten a fun question, which I feel okay bringing up here because it is very similar flavor. And I don't know who it was from. I'm sorry, because I didn't prep this. But the question was, if you could only give someone one Sarah J. Maas book to read, whether to hook them or just say, this is what you have to read to understand Sarah J. Maas, what book would it be?
Mist
and
Fury.
I think it would be Mist and Fury. I think it would be Mist and Fury. Yeah.
But I would honestly like bind together ACOTAR and Mist and Fury and force them into one book, because how can you appreciate Mist and Fury without ACOTAR.
I know. That's the tough thing. It's like you can't give whenever you're recommending a Sarah J. Maas series, you have to say read past the first book, not because the first book is bad, but because the first book is not ever a representation of what the series actually is, right?
Okay, well, thank you, Dalton Smithy, for the fun question.
Thank you, Dalton
Found it
Smithy.
fun and hard.
Favorites are hard. All right, moving on. COSMs. I don't have on here who starts. You want to start? I'll start.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
COSMs.
Corrections, omissions, social media, shout outs. I have a couple here, and I believe, I have a couple here. So, first one, we talked about in our Bryce Part 1 episode, and I made a little clip talking about it. The idea of having the Asteri tithe on Prythian and then the Asteri on Midgard just having to make the crystal gates and kind of turn them into a tourist attraction. And then the people of Midgard voluntarily give up a kernel of their power, whereas the people on Prythian fought to overthrow the Asteri because they were giving up a kernel of power because of the tithe, right? And a lot of people commented and said, hey, the gates weren't built by the Asteri. Like, that's not what's going on here. The gates were built by the Fae who created Lunathion. And I do think it's never confirmed. I want to say this. It is never confirmed that the gates were built by the Asteri. I was kind of pulling that out of my ass for sure. However, it has, as soon as we found out what the Asteri really are, I have always read the Crystal Gates as being basically a backup plan for them, right? Like if they run out of power because of the drop, if something happens, I've always read the Crystal Gates as being another way for them to siphon power from the people of Lunathion. That might be because I read Bryce as being an Asteri and she got all this power from the gates. That might be why it is. But I just wanted to kind of explain that has always been my read of it, even though that might just be my headcanon. I don't think there's anything in the text to back it up. So you guys are right, but that's how I've read it. And I did have other people comment and say, yeah, that's how I read it too. So I think we don't know on that one.
Well, and they live in a crystal palace and they sit on crystal thrones that absorb first light cores through a crystal pipe. So while it's fair, like I don't know who actually originally built it, it would sure make a lot of sense if the Asteri, who we know this particular set of Asteri were particularly innovative because they created this parasite, did create crystal gates.
Yeah, as like a backup
little power reserve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I
agree with you. We are not explicitly told. That's fair, guys. We're not explicitly told that the Asteri built it.
That is fair. I agree. All right, we got a comment on Spotify that I really like, and I really like it kind of in conjunction with what I think we're going to talk about in this episode. So this is from Hair Friend Darian on Spotify. I hope I said your name right, Hair Friend Darian. They said, what if the birth of the void, so we're talking about the Underking and Apollyon here, the princes of hell, the characters who are birthed from the void, is just people surviving a black hole and being altered by it. Like the princes of hell are the Asteri after they went into the black hole and were altered. That's why they couldn't control hell, because it was literally their powers. So I think this is a really interesting idea because the void, like Bryce opens a portal to a black hole and one of the princes of hell, I can't remember, says, oh, she's approaching the void. I think it was Adis, right? So we have a black hole being the void. And we also have, we'll talk about it in this episode, but I do think there's a lot of similarities between not necessarily the powers of the princes of hell, but the powers of the creations of the princes of hell and the powers of what we think are creations of the Asteri. So I think there's a lot to dig into here. I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I just wanted to call that out. So thank you, Hair Friend Darian.
Yeah, I agree. I think in this episode, it becomes a little fuzzy, the exact differences between what the Asteri are capable of and what some of the princes of hell and their creations are capable of. Yeah, I think it's
conduits.
Yeah. Conduit.
All right. Did you have any?
One correction I have from last time is I'd like to revise my answer to the other week's fun question. This is my favorite line of banter, probably in the entire 3 series. Well, at least in ACOTAR and Crescent City. When Hunt and Bryce are in the Bone Quarter and they're fighting the Shepherd, and Bryce tells Hunt to fry this fucker, Bryce muttered to Hunt as the dog snarled, I'm assessing. Assess faster. Roast it like a do not make a joke about hot dog. The fact that they are bantering mid-fighting the Shepherd and Bryce decides to say, roast it like a hot dog.
Yeah.
And Hunt is like, do not fucking say that, hot dog. It's fucking hilarious. So that's one correction on myself from last time. And then another interesting one that I'll call out as a social media shout out here, and then it kind of ties into my precog a little bit. We got a comment from Georgina's Anatomy, who I think previously has commented as Georgina, so hi Georgina, on a video that we had about Rune and Bryce having canonically different starlight but only one common parent, and like what is going on with Ember. It's interesting, right? This is my own kind of color to this. It's interesting that Ember's last name is Quinlan and Bryce very specifically is also Quinlan, right? And there's like a time when she goes to Dannon, but she's not Selago and she's not Dannon. She is Quinlan specifically. And Georgina commented, Quinlan, Queensland? And I just thought that was interesting. I've never linked Quinlan to anything really significant at all, but if we are claiming that Ember is significant, I think we might want to look a little bit harder at the last name, Quinlan. So more to come on that, but
more to come.
You made me think, Georgina. I like the shout out. And then Di commented a funny gif, which is Sabrina Carpenter with her tongue out, which is always fun. Hey, Di. Hi, Georgina.
We love that. I mean, I've seen some. I don't think there's enough to back it up here, which is I don't think why we've talked about it. But I've seen some, musings online about Quinlan and Quinn being 5, and then Adis is technically the 5th Prince of Hell, right? He's on the 5th level of Hell. So potentially some connection between
third child theory. Yeah.
Yeah. Those bloodlines, which I think would be fun and interesting too. But yeah, it is interesting that Bryce's name is adamantly Quinlan. Like emphatically, adamantly Quinlan.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. She is her mother's daughter.
She is her mother's daughter.
Her father's. It's important. All right. That's it for me though.
All right. Ronnie, shall we deep dive?
We shall.
All right. First question. And this is a big one. I'm going to be honest. I was surprised. I was surprised how big the answer to this question was. Ronnie, what are Hunt's powers?
Hey, everybody, take a seat because
strap in.
Because it's lightning, but also the lightning actually is connected to a fucking lot. So let's start with lightning power, which we later learn as Hellfire. It's widely interpreted as lightning. Let's dig into that. There's a lot here, guys. So let's start with lightning. So everyone knows that the Umbra Mortis has this rare lightning power and will F up everyone's day, basically. So we learn this very early, right? House of Earth and Blood, Chapter 2. Bryce makes very clear. She's like, the governor might even send the Umbra Mortis after him being Philip Briggs, right? So this is when Danica is still alive. She says Micah's personal assassin with the rare gift of lightning in his veins could eliminate almost any threat. So generally throughout the series, we get very common sentiment, widespread sentiment. Hunt has lightning, nobody else has it, and everybody knows that he has it. Also generally throughout the series, Hunt typically has a halo, with the exception of periods in House of Sky and Breath and periods in House of Flame and Shadow, that reduces his lightning power to 1/10 of what it normally is, per a quote in House of Earth and Blood, Chapter 6. So that plus the parasite and what he's able to do with the halo on, he's really fucking powerful, right? This lightning is very powerful. So in House of Earth and Blood, Chapter 6, Hunt and Isaiah are talking, and we get never in order. He, Isaiah, had never dared to order Hunt around, not when the male possessed a hair-trigger temper that he left entire Imperial fighting units in smoldering cinders. Even with the spells of the halo binding that lightning to 1/10 of its full strength, Hunt's skills as a warrior made up for it. So the halo restricts him, but he's still quite powerful. We see him do a lot with the halo on.
Can we pause on that line for a second, though, on that whole Isaiah Hunt? Like, our first introduction to Hunt is so, I'm loath to even say this because I know that people will take this and be like, yeah, Hunt is evil, but it's almost villain coded, right? She says he has a hair trigger temper. Like, Isaiah basically is like, let me see if I even have the quote. Maybe I don't. But like Isaiah describes himself as like being scared of him. And I don't think Hunt does have a hair trigger temper. Like we've never seen that from him. And like, I just think it's a very strange way to introduce a character. And I'm wondering if it's because she was setting up the Prince of Hell reveal even from here. Like something is different about Hunt. I mean, I think she probably was and I love it. But I just thought that was like a very weird, like I remember reading Crescent City 1 and not realizing Hunt was going to be the love interest for like a little while. Like I wasn't like, oh, this is our love interest, you know?
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think it also just fits in with who he's introduced as in this story. Like he's a subdued rebel slave, right? Yeah. Like he rebelled, he was squashed for it. He's repaying a debt by being forced to murder the equivalent of however many people in totality that his army murdered. Like he probably does have a hair trigger temper in his current situation. Like,
that's true. Yeah.
I understand that he as a person is not. And like this kind of is an arc of his, right? Like Bryce by House of Flame and Shadow is telling him, he's like, I am the Umbra Mortis. And she's like, no, you are not. Like you were the Umbra Mortis. That is who you were forced to be, but that is not who you are. So I do think that it is kind of an intentional character development that she starts with. She's like, he is a nightmare when we meet him.
Yeah, and I think this gets overlooked with Hunt a lot, but I do just want to call it out at the top of this episode. Hunt is 233 years old, and 200 of those years have been spent in slavery. He has been a slave for 200 years. Like, I
really
think that's
when all that happened.
He's had such a hard life. He has had such a hard life, so much harder than any of our other male main characters that we get in the Maasverse. So just want to remind everyone of that before we kind of dig into him. Yeah.
Yes. So let's talk about Hunt without the halo, which we don't really get visuals of Hunt sans halo, sans parasite. But when he has the halo removed in House of Earth and Blood, chapter 89, and again, we don't get direct visuals of it, but we get some interesting descriptors, right? This is when everything is going down with Bryce and Micah far away. Hypaxia takes the halo off of Hunt, basically betting that he will kill Sandriel so that Sandriel doesn't kill Hypaxia. Lightning gathered around his hands, the walls cracked, debris rained from the ceiling. Sandriel was too slow. Rune knew Sandriel had signed her own death warrant when she didn't bring her Triari back with her. I'm going to skip a little bit just because we're going to be reading a lot if we don't skip a little bit. Even her Archangel's might couldn't protect her from Athalar, from what he felt for Bryce. Athalar's lightning skittered over the floors. Sandriel barely had time to lift her arms and summon a gale force wind before Hunt was upon her. Lightning erupted the entire room, cracking with it. Rune threw himself under a table, grabbing Hypaxia with him. Slabs of stone slammed onto the surface above them. Flynn swore up a storm beside him, and Declan crouched low, curling around a laptop. A cloud of debris filled the space, choking them. Ether coated Rune's tongue. Lightning flared, licking and crackling through the room. Then time shifted and slowed, sliding by. Each word an eternity in a flash, the world tipping over again, slowing and dragging. Fuck. Then the lightning stopped. The cloud of debris pulsed and hummed. And then we find out he literally burned Sandriel from the inside out, right? So, and from his hand, gripped by the hair, dangled Sandriel's severed head. Her mouth was still open in a scream, smoke rippling from her lips, the skin of her neck so damaged, Rune knew Hunt had torn it off with his bare hands. Hunt slowly lifted the head before him, as if he were one of the ancient heroes of the Reagan Sea, surveying a slain creature. A monster. He let the Archangel's head drop. It thumped and lolled to the sides, smoke still trickling from the mouth, the nostrils. He'd flayed her with his lightning from the inside out. So the halo comes off of him, and he immediately fucks up an entire room and destroys an Archangel from the inside out, right? And Archangels are supposed to be like the most powerful angels, right, to exist. And we'll talk more about how Hunt has the power of an Archangel in a little bit, but very, very, very powerful, which makes sense. We know that he basically destroyed cities, but he's very powerful. As far as the other things that lightning can do, right? It's typically like writhing, breathing, skittering around his fingertips, arms, wings, but sometimes it does more interesting stuff, right? So Hunt's lightning helps him detect energy fields, which interestingly helps him detect spells, right? So when he's going to find Bryce at Jezebel's library, he is able to literally detect like the wards that Jezebel has up, right? So in chapter 10 of Crescent City 1, Hunt scanned the sandstone facade again. There was no way Jezebel Roga wouldn't have cameras covering every inch, both outside and within. Hunt unleashed a crackle of his power, small tongues of lightning tasting for energy fields. Nearly invisible in the sunny morning, the lightning bounced off a skin-tight enchantment coating the stone, the mortar, the door, a cold, clever spell that seemed to laugh softly at any attempt to enter. So he, because his power is energy, can basically send energy out and test energy fields, which makes sense, but it's also interesting when you think about like the actual manifestations of that and what he's capable of doing. He can detect enchantments. And then we've already talked about generally, but no one other than Apollyon has this lightning power who's alive. So you could argue that Sophie, Reyna, did. And the Thunderbirds had something very similar. So we'll talk about the Thunderbirds as well. But it's widely accepted, right, that nobody had this that he could find because he taught himself, right? He says he looked desperate in his youth for anyone who might teach him how to control it, but he'd had to teach himself in the end, which is really impressive, right? Like he has incredible control over this power. Like he's slinging it into leashes. He's slinging it into rope. Like he has a lot of control over lightning power. I mean, he's been alive for 200 years, but nobody taught him this. It was just
Yeah,
him.
Shahar made him general of her armies at 33, right? So presumably he had amazing control over this power at 33.
Yes. Yeah, which is crazy.
Also, two things, sorry, from that scene you read before that had never even really occurred to me. One, I did not realize that Declan literally covers his laptop with his body to protect it from Hunt's wrath, which is fucking hilarious and so in character. And two, the Medusa imagery in that scene, right? Like he's just holding the head up. Like it's so Medusa coded, which I really like. Didn't dig into that at all. But if someone wants to, feel free, let us know what's in that.
Yeah, please do. Sandriel to Medusa. Like, link it to her Triari, if you will, please. That would be really interesting.
Well, or Hunt. I don't even remember who slays Medusa. It might be Hercules. Perseus.
Orion, because Orion's got some bleak shit.
Yeah. No, it's Perseus. So, if someone wants to tell us the similarities between Perseus and...
Duh.
Oh, yeah, Percy Jackson. Duh.
Percy Jackson. Okay. So he has incredible control, given nobody was around to teach him. And he knew of the Thunderbirds, but like the Thunderbirds had effectively been killed out by the time that he was around. Like Sophie has this power, but she only had it, and we'll talk more about Sophie, of course, but she only had it by chance. Her great grandmother or something had like mated a human. So this power was passed down to her, but full Thunderbirds have not been around for quite some time. This is kind of probably not that important, but he's capable not only of wielding lightning from his hands and like other areas of his body, but he seems to be capable of causing lightning in the sky around him, maybe, right? So in House of Earth and Blood, chapter 45, when he sends a babysitter after Bryce, when she like storms off and he tried to go to the bar and she's like, I'm not going to stay home, which seemed kind of dumb. Like she didn't really do anything. She asked him, is this the part where you start yelling? And lightning cracked through the sky and echoed in his veins as he leaned closer and purred. So in times of heightened emotion for Hunt, this is not the only time we see it. We get lightning, we get thunder, we get weather around him. So it seems to extend beyond just his core. Like there is weather around him that occurs.
I believe all of the angels are said to be able to control the weather, but they get fined if they fuck with it too heavily.
Yes, I do have more on archangels and storms.
Okay.
For sure, because I do think that's important. We don't really hear much from Hunt about other weather, but it seems to be present. So he can basically, with his lightning power, be a defibrillator. So we learn that when Bryce needs to be brought back to life, Hunt shocks her, right? Like a defibrillator. So when he's in chapter 93 of Crescent City 1, Bryce is dead. Like her body is dead. Her mortal body is dead from the drop. He's pumping her torso with his hands, chest compressions. Hunt hissed to Bryce through his gritted teeth, thunder cracking above him. Again, the thunder. I heard what you said. Pump, pump, pump went his powerful arms. What you waited to admit until I was almost dead, you fucking coward. His lightning surged into her, sending her body arcing off the ground as he tried to jumpstart her heart. He snarled in her ear, now come say it to my face. So, again with the weather, he is altering the weather, but he is also using his lightning to try to jumpstart her heart.
I believe he does it to Lydia on the Death Charger as well, when she's close to death. I believe
he was.
It's not said on page, but it's highly implied that he does it to Lydia too.
Yeah. I think they say that he had been like helping the resuscitation effort or something to that effect. Yeah, you're right. His lightning also helps him understand how machines work, which we learn when he offers to help fix Bryce's bike, and then he confesses to Sandriel using him to help break machines, which results in the death of a lot of people. And then he also eventually uses it to understand the Asteri mech suits that Ophion tries to steal. So we learn this in House of Sky and Breath, chapter 12. Bryce asks, you know how to fix a bike? And Hunt's amusement slipped a notch. Yeah, I know how to fix a lot of machines. Does your lightning give you an affinity for knowing how they work or something? Yeah, Hunt trained his gaze upon the Istros. The relentless sun was finally setting, casting the river in reds and golds and oranges. Far below, the little lights glowed, all that showed of the mighty sprawling corp beneath the water. He said quietly, Sandriel took advantage of that. She often had me take apart Ophion's mech suits after battles, so I could understand how they worked and then sabotage them before discreetly sending the machines back to the front for the Ophion rebels to use unwittingly. So he's able to use his power to mess with machines as well. And then we see it later in chapter 43. I won't read it, but he he basically like looks at and touches the Asteri mech suits and is like, I understand how these work. They'll draw first light from the ground and people can wear them like an exoskeleton. And Pippa goes crazy and is like, we need these right now. And then Hunt destroys them. In a similar vein, it helps him sever wiring and stuff. That's not really that interesting, but it's handy in a world of tech where there's cameras everywhere. He just can sever cameras, lights, etc. And then his lightning can also act as a rope or a leash, right? So we see that twice. We see it on the shepherd when in House of Sky and Breath chapter 31, Hunt is trying to subdue the shepherd and he basically puts like a collar of lightning around its neck, which because the shepherd is from hell, the shepherd seems to be able to just get rid of it, which is scary. And then, of course, like the most important use ever probably of lightning rope is when he is trying to get out of the black hole and he throws the lightning at Apollyon, and Apollyon is the only person in the world who can catch it. I literally just picture like a lasso moment where he's like, catch, and then Apollyon is able to pull him and Bryce out of the black hole. This isn't specifically about lightning, but the Oracle calls him a Lord of Lightning.
Yes.
Which I just think is an interesting title, specifically because of how strongly Hunt reacts to it, and then how the Oracle uses his name, his real name, Orion, which he also reacts strongly to, and then decides to treat the Oracle as if the Oracle itself is a god of sorts. So that passage is in Crescent City 1, House of Earth and Blood, chapter 33. This is the Oracle. Be grateful, Lord of Lightning, that you learned anything at all. That voice, that title. His mouth went dry. Do you wish to know what I see in your future, Orion Athalar? He recoiled at the sound of his birth name like he'd been punched in the gut. No one has spoken that name in 200 years, he whispered. The name your mother gave you. Yes, he ground out, his gut twisting at the memory of his mother's face, the love that had always shone in her eyes for him. Utterly undeserved, that love, especially when he had not been there to protect her. The Oracle whispered, shall I tell you what I see, Orion? I'm not sure I want to know. He eventually says, thanks seemed wise, like something that might appease a god. So he's treating the Oracle like a god. The Oracle is calling him Lord of Lightning, calling him Orion. He's linking Orion to his mother, but we know that Apollyon named him Orion, right? Apollyon was the reason that he was named Orion in the first place. So Lord of Lightning, just interesting, right? Like Cassian is called Lord of Bastards, and we have linked in the past, right? Cassian and Hunt seem similar.
Yeah,
similar in many ways.
I agree.
And Bryce and Nesta are pals now, it seems. So that's myriad of different purposes of lightning. We later, of course, find out that this is Hellfire. It's called Hellfire. Apollyon calls it Hellfire. And that this is not dissimilar from Thunderbird power. We'll talk about Thunderbirds in 5 seconds, but we learn that the Hellfire from Thanatos says, just as he gave over, he being Apollyon, some of his essence for the Crystallos, so he gave something to me for you, his Hellfire. Hellfire? Bryce demanded. The lightning, Thanatos said, waving an irritated hand, capable of killing almost anything, even an Asteri. And then naturally, Hunt, who asks more of the right questions than Bryce does, says, can my lightning kill an Asteri? And the answer is unfortunately no.
Just to be clear, real quick there, the lightning is from Apollyon. Right?
Apollyon.
It's from Thanatos put it into him. Like Thanatos made him.
Yeah, I said just as Apollyon gave over some of his essence for the Crystallos, Thanatos said. So he gave something to me for you, his Hellfire. So yes, it's Apollion's Hellfire. Thanatos is the mad scientist. Thanatos put Apollion's power into Hyrieus's and Hunt's nameless mother's child, and so Hunt came to be. Hunt, this is where we're going to talk about Thunderbirds. Hunt is also a conduit. He can absorb power and translate it into his own. So this is the clearest link to Thunderbird power. So lightning, Hellfire, you could argue like that is Apollyon, but there is nothing more Thunderbird than this conduit power. Thunderbird's also, like what Sophie does, she wields electricity. Like it looks like fucking lightning. It seems to be very, very similar, but he is a conduit. He absorbs power. He translates it into his own. And that is extremely, extremely similar to what the Thunderbirds are capable of doing. I'd argue it's basically the same. So we learn about Hunt's link to the Thunderbirds through the Princes of Hell. And this link is through his biological father, Hyrieus, who, is that how you say it? Hyrieus? I'm going to say Hyrieus, who led Project Thur, which was research into the Thunderbird origins. So we learn about this in House of Flame and Shadow, chapter 61. There was a scientist at the Asteri archives, Ada said, an angel, who was delving into the origins of the Thunderbirds, how strange their power was. He named the project after a near-forgotten god of storms. Project Thur, Bryce said. Was Danica investigating it too? I found mentions of it after she died. I don't know, Ada said, but the angel was researching Thunderbirds at the behest of the Asteri, who worried they might return. It led him to us instead. When we told him the truth, he offered to help in whatever way he could. Thanatos was finishing up his work then, and with a male volunteer, only a female to breed with was needed. Hunt couldn't breathe. Bryce laid a hand on his knee. Your father knew your mother briefly, Ada said, and he knew having a partner would help lift her from her poverty. He had every intention of staying, of leaving behind his life and raising you in secret. Hunt could barely ask what happened. The mystics told Rigulus of your father's connection to us. They didn't discover everything, nothing about you or your mother, only that he had been speaking to us. Rigulus had him brought in, tortured, and executed. Hunt's heart stalled. He didn't break, Apollyon said, with something like kindness. He never mentioned your mother or her pregnancy. The Asteri never knew you were tied to him in any way. What was his name? Curious. Aetus answered. He was a good male, Hunt Athalar, as you are. So Hunt was born of Hell as a result of Hurius partnering with the Princes of Hell as a result of his research into Thunderbirds. And Hunt has pretty clear similarities to Thunderbirds, and we know that Hell created the Thunderbirds. We are going to read that quote in this episode, so just trust us on this for right now. Hell created the Thunderbirds. Sophie Raynast is the only Thunderbird we've ever met, right? So in House of Sky and Breath, the prologue, which highly recommend a reread of the prologue if you've only read the prologue once, because
there's
the first
so
time you
much
read
in
the
that
prologue, you're so much. It's crazy. And the first time you read it, you're like, I want Bryce and Hunt. What the fuck is going on right now? And you kind of just fly through it. But you must go back. You must go back once you know what the Thunderbirds are and why they exist. So
this prologue is a map. It is a map. It is crazy for Hunt's power. Yeah, it's wild.
So Sophie wielding her power in this prologue, right? We get her on the dock. After the context, right, is she's breaking the kids out of this terrible camp, right? So she and Silverbow, who we know now as Cormac, are breaking the kids out. Her brother is with her. They're on the dock. Everyone's trying to escape, and she's like, I'm going to hold off these fucking soldiers. So she's on the dock. She's about to absorb power. She closed her eyes, readying herself, gathering her power. Lights went out on the block around her. When she opened her eyes to the newfound darkness, Emil had reached the dock. Silver waited at the ramp, beckoning beneath the one streetlight that remained lit. So she's literally absorbing the electricity into her.
She's absorbing the first light. Yeah, it's first light. They're first light lamps.
Yeah. She's absorbing the first light just by existing, just through no crystal, through just the ground. So that's different, right? That's dangerous and different from the Asteri, right? They don't need a conduit. They don't need any special material. They just absorb by standing there. And then later, when she's about to let it out, when everybody's standing in inches of water and is about to be fried by this shit, she let the power she'd gathered by the docks unspool. Crackling energy curled at her fingertips and amid the strands of her short brown hair. One of the Dreadwolves understood then, matched what he was seeing with the myths Vanir whispered to their children. She's a fucking Thunderbird, the wolf roared, just as Sophie unleashed the power she'd gathered on the water, flooding the square, on the Dreadwolves standing ankle deep in it. They didn't stand a chance. Sophie pivoted toward the docks as the electricity finished slithering over the stones, hardly sparing a glance for the smoking, half-submerged carcasses. The silver darts along their collars glowed molten hot. Another whistle, she could still make it. Sophie splashed through the flooded square, breath ragged in her throat. The Dreadwolf had been only half right. She was part Thunderbird. Her great-grandmother had mated with a human long ago before being executed. The gift, more legend than truth these days, had resurfaced in Sophie. It was why the rebels had wanted her so badly, why they had sent her out on such dangerous missions. Skipping a bit, the Asteri had long ago hunted most Thunderbirds to extinction. She'd never learned how her great-grandmother had survived, but the descendants had kept the bloodline secret. She had kept it a secret. Skipping a bit again, so many times for those rebels, she had drawn up power from the grid, from lights and machines, and killed until her soul lay in tatters, right? This isn't really important about the Thunderbirds. I was going to call out the Starlight Fancy Horse. We also learn that Thunderbirds once helped necromancers, right? So we never see this manifested in Hunt, but I think it's interesting, and I figured I'd pull it out. I don't know if you had it.
We kind of do.
Well, we do, but we don't see it done right. Not the way that Hypaxia was intending to do it.
Right. Well,
we see
I was
Rigulus
talking about
it.
We see Rigulus did something. Can we pause for a second though on Sophie? I think we need to just break this down for 1 second, because we now have 3 types of beings in theory that can absorb first light and do something with it. So we have the Asteri. Yeah. We've talked about the Asteri, and basically what we really see them do with it is turn it into Starfire, right? So turn it into that laser power. We have Bryce, who's of the Starborn Fae, who needs to be charged up. And that first light then becomes basically just power for her. It can be Starfire. It can be what charges her up to blow the horn. It can be what charges her up to teleport. It can be any of those things. Both of those things, we have the Asteri, we think the Starborn or Asteri are Asteri made. Now we have a third category, and that is the Thunderbirds. And unfortunately, the two examples we have for this are Sophie, who is only part Thunderbird, and Hunt, who is part Angel. But we see Hunt do this later, and I'm sure Ronnie's about to get to it, in the Bone Quarter when he absorbs light from the Dead Gate. But we have Sophie here explicitly saying she is absorbing first light. She is transferring it to lightning. She is basically creating a different type of energy from the first light, and then she is emitting it. And it doesn't seem like Sophie can hang on to it, similar to the way that Bryce can't really hang on to it. Like Sophie needs to be recharged, needs to be re-upped in order to basically create lightning, right? She absorbs power, and then why can't I think of the word that's the opposite of absorbs? Like emits power, basically, in a different form. She also later, with the Omega boats, and I think this is interesting. So this is basically the last time Sophie uses her powers, and at the time you don't know it's Sophie. But Pippa ran for the bridge's better view. She arrived panting, Richmond beside her, in time to see the Bodegraven, sorry guys, racing for them, the submerged lights of the 4 Omega boats flickering behind, closing in. But as they did, a mighty white light soared beneath the surface. It wrapped its long arms around the nearest Omega. The white light leapt away a moment later, flying for the next boat. No submersible lights glowed in its wake. On the radar before her, the Omega boat vanished. Holy gods, Richmond said. Something like that, Pippa wanted to say. It was Sophie's strange gift. Not only electricity, but first light power too. Energy of any type was hers to command, to suck into herself. Her kind had been hunted to extinction by the Asteri centuries ago because of that mighty, unconquerable gift, or so it had seemed. Closer now, the light swept beneath the surface for the third boat, and even with the distance, Pippa could see the core of long, bright white tendrils streaming from it like wings. The white light slammed into the Omega, miles worth of first light, sending the final ship spiraling into a watery abyss, and then a leap outward, a whip of light illuminating the waves above it to turquoise, a stretching hand. So she is literally manipulating first light, right? She is taking in first light, and she is then manipulating to it, which sounds so much like the Starfire power. Right? Like it is light that is solid. Like she is doing something with it, and she needs to be charged up to use it. I mean, I don't know if Bryce needs to be charged up to use her Starfire. We talked about the kind of differences and when she needs to be charged up, when she doesn't. But this just seems so similar to me. It seems like such a similar power that I'm kind of like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what is this?
It's interesting because I actually interpreted it as more so what you just described, right? Sophie's power being manipulation of first light. To me, actually sounds more like Hunt that we haven't seen, right? Like Hunt that hasn't necessarily demonstrated this yet. So Bryce requires first light. I don't know whether her Starfire is that necessarily though. Like I don't know. I just don't know. Right. We have a quote from Declan in House of Sky and Breath, chapter 63, that describes Hunt's power as pure energy, which sounds exactly like that, right? He says, "You're literally a gate to Bryce. You can take in power and offer it, but it seems the similarity ends there. The gates can store power indefinitely, while yours clearly peters out after a while," similar to Sophie. He faced Hunt, and your power, Athalar, as pure energy is able to draw from her, like she did from the gate. Bryce, when you draw from a source, it's the same way the gates zap power from people using them to communicate. So Declan is saying, and like, what does Declan know, right? But sometimes Sarah just uses characters to like explain stuff.
I would trust Declan. Yeah.
From to explain stuff to us. He's basically saying like, Bryce, you require first light and then you offer power. And Athalar, like Hunt, your power is pure energy, and you can take energy and then you can give energy in like whatever form of energy you choose to give, which is crazy. Like that's crazy. That's wild. But I don't really know, like to your point, I don't really understand the differences between them at this point.
Both of them can take, but we know that Hunt can give. We know that Bryce can give because we see Bryce give her energy to Hunt later, which we'll talk about in this episode and the next episode. But both of them are conduits. That's what Apollyon says. But they're so similar. They're so similar that it feels like there's something going on here.
Yeah. But then Apollyon says, like, it's important that you are together, which would imply that they are like two parts of a whole in some way, or like some combination of them is important and that they are not exactly the same. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they're exactly the same. To be clear, I don't think they're exactly the same. But I do think maybe if we're going crackpot, Hell saw what the Asteri were doing and said, oh, no, we need to do that too. But
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Sophie's fucking crazy. Thunderbirds are crazy.
Thunderbirds are crazy.
At one point, like Hypaxia somehow knows, right? Because she has very old tutors. When what's her fucking face? Sigrid comes back as a Reaper. I hate her. Sorry, hate is a strong word. I don't care for Sigrid.
Sigrid is bad. Sigrid is bad.
She sucks.
Yeah.
Hypaxia somehow knows when Ethan is like, fix this. She's like, maybe I can, but we need a Thunderbird. So we then learn, right, that Thunderbirds once helped necromancers. So in House of Flame and Shadow, Crescent City 3, chapter 49, Ethan is pissed and he's like, fix it. And Hypaxia says, I'm trying to minimize the quote, she says, once the dead have crossed that threshold into Reaperdom, Hypaxia's gaze met Ethan's in hell, the pain bleeding away to pure determination. Necromancy can lead her to that threshold. It can haul her back again too. How? Jezebel asked. Ethan could barely breathe. We need a Thunderbird. Jezebel threw up her hands. There are none left. And then I'm skipping a bit, but the Thunderbirds were once able to aid necromancers to use their lightning to hold the souls of the dead. They could even imbue their power into ordinary objects like weapons and give them magical properties. Which is super interesting, right? Like we have not, I know that you mentioned, and you're right, that we have seen Hunt's lightning aid necromancy, but it kind of just like reincarnated a corpse, sort of. But to say that we could use their lightning to hold the souls of the dead, and we don't actually get this, right? We don't see this followed through, unfortunately, with Sigrid. But lightning holding, like this energy holding souls, and then also the imbuing their power into ordinary objects. We sort of see this when Hunt blasts the Star Sword, but this almost makes it seem like they can potentially make things, which is also very Asteri-like. Like what they're describing is almost Trove-like. So we have not seen Hunt do this necessarily, but it's interesting to ponder what he might be capable of there because the series is not over.
So I forgot about the Souls of the Dead line. However, I think that actually lines up perfectly when you look at who Hunt's fathers are, right? So we know he got the Hellfire from Apollyon, but he got something from Thanatos too. And we know he got something from Thanatos too, because in Crescent City 3, chapter 61, when the connection is about to be severed between Hunt and Bryce and the Princes of Hell, Apollyon says to him, do not squander the gifts that have been given to you by me, by my brother, implying there is a different gift that was given to him by his brother. And his brother is the Prince of Souls, right? That is how Thanatos describes himself, right? I don't know if Apollyon and Thanatos also made the Thunderbirds and it's a similar thing going on. But for Hunt, we know that the Prince of Souls is his other father. So if you think about it that way, the lightning being able to hold souls makes a lot of sense. And we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen Hunt do this yet. Like it's, we also know that I think we know that Hunt got something from Thanatos because the way that literally basically the first time we meet Hunt, he smells Bryce's power, right? So the quote is, she's here, Hunt said. The scent of her still lingered on the sidewalk, lilac and nutmeg, and something he couldn't quite place, like the gleam of the first stars at nightfall, right? That's dusk. The gleam of the first stars at nightfall is dusk. We know that Thanatos is the one who says to Bryce, your starlight smells fresher. So I think this is evidence that he got something from Thanatos. And I think we get another clue with this when he's trying to bring Bryce back to life at the end of Crescent City 3. We have Hunt crashed his lightning into her heart again. It had worked before. That day of the demon attack in the spring, he'd brought her back to life. But her heart did not answer this time. Rigelus had used his God's damned lightning to resurrect the Harpy. Why the fuck didn't it work now? What had Rigelus known about Hunt's own power that Hunt didn't, right? So I think this is all going to that resurrection piece of it, and it feels like a bigger resurrection than whatever Hypaxia can do right now, whatever Rigelus did with the Harpy. Like this is something else. Like this is truly bringing someone back from the dead, which makes you wonder who Hunt is going to bring back from the dead. Right? Like, who is he going to raise from the dead? Because that seems to be where we're going with this power from him, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is interesting because Apollyon also specifically says that they can't bring anybody back.
Right.
From the dead.
Right.
So this would imply that they've introduced something completely new, which would make sense because you're combining their power with a necromancer. So you're basically saying, like, the lightning holds the soul. But the necromancy brings them back, and the necromancy is not Apollyon's or.
Well, I
Theus's.
think it implies it doesn't need to be someone who's newly dead. I think this implies we could be bringing someone back who's 15,000 years old, potentially, if we have access to their soul. I don't know. I'm curious to see where she's going to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fian, what are you doing?
What are you doing in that bog, Fian?
Yeah. I just can't get over the trove similarity. Like,
yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's wild.
Yeah.
But
because even if this is even though he has blasted the Star Sword, that's not what this is talking about, right?
No.
Imbue their power into ordinary objects. Like the Star Sword is not ordinary. The Star Sword already had power. So I don't know what Hunt is going to imbue, but I'm excited to find out. All right. So what we do see Hunt do that the Thunderbirds are capable of doing is become a conduit. Just like the Thunderbirds, just like Sophie, taking any energy, taking First Light, and turning it into his own raw electricity, lightning power. So he first learns, right, that he can do this in the Bone Quarter. So this is in House of Sky and Breath, Crescent City 2, Chapter 32. Hunt braced a hand on the Dead Gate's brass plaque as he tried to raise himself once more. Power sucked from his fingers, pulled into the stone. He snatched his hand back. So he's like trying to lift himself. He puts his hand on the Dead Gate just to get up, and he's like, oh shit, I just absorbed power, which begs the question, like, have you never touched anything that had imbued power? So Hunt peered at the Dead Gate's archway above him. First Light flowed both ways, into the Dead Gate and out of it, and here where the last power of the dead was fed into it, here was a well, like the one Bryce had used during the attack last spring. Sophie and Emil Reynas could channel energy too, and lightning. Hunt was no Thunderbird, but could he do the same? Lightning flowed in his veins. His body was equipped to handle raw, sizzling energy. Was this what Apollyon had hinted at? Why the prince wanted not only him and Bryce, but Emil and Sophie? Had the prince of the pit engineered this situation, manipulating them into coming to the Bone Quarter so that Hunt would be forced to realize what he could do with his own power? Perhaps Emil hadn't even come here at all. Perhaps the Reapers had lied about that at Apollyon's behest. Or Rigelus's, just to get them here to this place, this moment. Bryce angled her sword higher, ready to fight until the end. Hunt gazed at her for a moment, an avenging angel in her own right, and then slammed his hand onto the brass plaque of the Dead Gate. Bryce dared only a glance behind her as Hunt bellowed again. He was standing, but his hand, white blinding First Light, or was it Second Light, flowed from the Dead Gate up his arm, up his shoulder, and on the other side of the archway, the stone began to go dark, as if he were draining it. And then, skipping a bit, Hunt could barely stand. The First Light had flayed him, leaving a smoking ruin inside his body, his mind. But it had worked. He'd taken the power and converted it into his own, whatever the fuck that meant. Apollyon had known, or guessed enough to be right. And Bryce, the Sword, she'd been a conduit to his power. So he does this, right? He knows that the Dead Gate is a well of power. He says, all right, I'm going to try to absorb it, and then he does. He takes the power, he converts it into his own. It works. It does flay him. Like, it hurts. So I do think that might be a hint that maybe he's not full Thunderbird, but also Sophie feels that too. And Sophie is part. Like, Sophie's only part Thunderbird. And she indicates, right, in her own narrative that, like, she absorbs power and kills, and then it leaves her in tatters. So
yeah,
maybe full Thunderbirds don't experience that.
Yeah, she says the First Light always hurt so much worse than electricity. It charred her insides, even as it left her craving more of its potent power. It was why she avoided it as much as possible. But yeah, I don't know if this is being a half Thunderbird or if this is just a difference between Thunderbirds and Starborn. You know, Thunderbirds, it hurts. Starborn, it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that it doesn't hurt with electricity, but it hurts with First Light. Like, is this something about the, like, a starry food that burns? I don't know. So, I mean, Hunt says he's no Thunderbird, but, like, obviously he's part Thunderbird. Anyways, he is born of the same guy studying the Thunderbirds and the same people who made them.
I think what's also important in this scene is he absorbs the First Light or the Second Light from the gate, right? He converts it to electricity. He pushes it into Bryce. Bryce pushes it into the sword as electricity. It stays electricity. It doesn't become Starfire or any of her powers. It stays electricity when it goes into the sword. Hunt's voice was a thunderclap as he said behind her, lighted up Bryce. The words bloomed in Bryce's heart at the same moment Hunt shot a bolt of his power, the Dead Gate's power, into her. It burned and roared and blinded, a writhing ball of energy that Bryce broke to her will and funneled into the Star Sword. Forks of lightning cracked from Hunt, from her, from the sword.
They're both conduits. What does it mean?
What does it mean?
So, very Thunderbird-like. His power, so we have Hunt and the Thunderbirds. We also have Hunt and the Archangels. And now he's not exactly either one of these, right? But he has very strong similarities to both, right? And we get a super clear call out from an Archangel herself that Hunt has the power of an Archangel, despite not being one himself. And that is from Celestina in House of Flame and Shadow, Crescent City 3, Chapter 79. Celestina's brown eyes widened at his lightning, released from its bonds. This is after his halo is gone the second time, and spreading through the world. She'd never seen the full extent of what he could do. She'd never had the chance during those weeks they'd worked together. How is it that you have the power of archangels but are not one yourself? So let's talk a little bit about the power of archangels, because I think it's super interesting, right? It's all like derivations of storm power, right? But not lightning specifically. And Hunt has more storm power, like more storminess than anyone ever says, right? Like everyone's always talking about lightning, but we get a lot of storm imagery with them too. So we learn about archangel power first in Chapter 6 of Crescent City 1. Lightning danced along his knuckles, a mild showing of the power Isaiah had witnessed being unleashed upon their enemies, lightning capable of bringing down a building. Whether ordinary angel or archangel, the power was always some variation of the same. Rain, storms, the occasional tornado. Isaiah himself could summon wind capable of keeping a charging enemy at bay, but none in living memory possessed Hunt's ability to harness lightning at his will, or the depth of power to make it truly destructive. It had been Hunt's salvation and destruction. So Hunt in particular is not an archangel, right? In fact, he had gray wings and common blood that was noted to be in total contrast with his powers, right? So in Chapter 13, we get only the Highborn would do for the Asteri's elite private legion, even if it meant passing over good soldiers like Isaiah. Hunt, with his gray wings and common blood despite his lightning, had never been in the running. There's a lot of storm imagery, not just lightning imagery, that is linked to Hunt often. And this will tie in more with Thur, which we will talk about, but we get it everywhere, right? Hunt said, voice like thunder. The lady wants an audience with his majesty. We get that literally in book 1 before we even see Hunt really do anything. House of Sky and Breath, Chapter 17, his head filled with fire and lightning and storms. We get the wind whipped at his hair, carrying the fresh scent of the Istros from across the city. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon and lightning danced in his veins. Chapter 27, House of Sky and Breath. Bryce could have sworn thunderstorms rumbled in the room. It was answer and acceptance of what she'd said, like he was beyond words now. This is after she says she loves him. Hunt's voice was a thunderclap. You just read that. So we get tons of storm imagery around Hunt in particular. So it makes sense that Celestina sees him and is like, you have archangel power. And then we also see a very direct link between what Celestina looks like when she starts wielding power and what Hunt looks like when he goes full rage days, right?
Yeah.
When Bryce is in danger and they go into the depth charger, his eyes, right, go pure lightning, like white lightning, no irises, no pupils, no nothing, just like white lightning eyes. And when Hunt and Bryce run into the closet that Hypaxia and Celestina are hooking up in, and Celestina is like ready to defend Hypaxia, who seems to maybe be a mate. We should talk more about that at some point, but not today. Bryce said breathlessly to Hypaxia as she sensed the brewing storm in the cloakroom, I've never been in this kind of situation before. Hypaxia glanced to the governor, whose eyes had turned white, flaring with power, and said to Bryce, an attempt at casualness, me neither. So we have Celestina's eyes completely turning white as well. So the archangels are supposed to be like derivations and creations of the Asteri. Hunt seems very similar to the archangels, also seems very similar to the Thunderbirds, which were a creation of Hell. I have questions about who Hunt's mom was. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, because I always just read that scene with Celestina and Hypaxia as, yeah, they are mates, like they're true mates, but they're not. Yeah. They shouldn't be, because only Fae are supposed to have true mates, right? And Celestina is an archangel and Hypaxia is a witch. So what is going on in that scene? Like, what is that rage days?
Crescent City witches are, but sure.
yeah, no, and that's totally fair. That's totally fair. But in theory, at its most base level, well, and we'll talk about this next episode, like that rage days is unlike anything we've ever seen in any kind of mated pair across the Maasverse. So yeah, it is interesting that the only other place we really see it is with an archangel. I do think that's very interesting. Yeah. Did you have any more on that one?
Not on the archangel stuff, do you?
Only that Micah's power is always described as cold every time. Yeah. So we get
where do the archangels come from?
Yeah. When Micah walks into the gallery, we get vast cold power crackled in the gallery, crackling again, even though he doesn't have lightning, right? But the Archangel's face remained unreadable. When he lands in the night garden, we get vast cold power erupted through the site, the garden, the whole quarter of the city. Naomi whirled as Micah landed. Silence fell, Vanir of all types backing away as the Archangel prowled towards the fallen demon and Hunt. I also want to talk about, I did have the quote from Isaiah. Let me find it real quick. So this is the quote from Isaiah I was referencing before. It took all 2 centuries of Isaiah's training on and off the battlefield to avoid flinching at that voice, to turn slowly toward the angel he knew would be leaning against the doorway, wearing his usual black battle suit, an angel who reason and history reminded him was an ally, though every instinct roared the opposite: predator, killer, monster. It's very similar to descriptions we get of people meeting archangels and like their power just rippling, and meeting the Asteri too, right? Like Bryce is so overcome with power, she won't, well, she looks up, but like she has trouble like looking the Asteri in the face. Like it's just like this unbelievable power. And the other comps we get are not the princes of hell, right? Like this is not how Bryce feels when she meets Adis. It's not how Bryce and Hunt feel when they meet Apollyon and Thanatos. They're not quaking at the amount of power that these princes have. I do think they have crazy power, but it's not the same reaction. You know, it's an angel Asteri reaction rather than a hell reaction. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I have anything to add if you don't have anything more. I mean, we've been chatting about this for a while, and I feel like I just did
1 hour in and 1 question in. I think that covers Hunt's powers. He makes varied use of his hellfire. I will put it that way. He does a lot.
Yeah, so I would say the big things here, if we're going to do the TLDR version of this, if you guys want to skip an hour of chit chat and just get to the TLDR version, he has lightning. We know he has lightning. That lightning gives him an affinity for feeling out wards and also for machines. But he doesn't really have lightning. That's not really his power. He's really a conduit, and his energy just kind of manifests as lightning, which is probably going to sound very similar to you guys to another series that we cover, but that's a brief aside. So really, he can take in any energy. So far, we have seen that manifest as lightning. But if we are going based off what Sophie Renest could do, he may be able to manifest his power as something else too. And there seems to be something going on with his power and the ability to fully resurrect souls and dead people more powerfully than we have seen thus far in Crescent City.
There's a lot, and we will talk about this more, and I understand this. People who are very worried about Hunt's outlook because he has the nickname Umbra Mortis, and he has, advice from the Oracle to stay away from Bryce and like all of this stuff. He has a lot of death imagery that follows him, but I also think that this particular piece around resurrection is very interesting, right? Like if he has the power to actually hold souls and help bring them back, then is Shadow of Death not foreshadowing for him, but is it foreshadowing for like his purpose or like something that he is going to do, which I think fits very nicely with what we have been given about Thunderbirds, his close cousins so far.
I think that also works with the idea of Thanatos being one of his parents, right? Because Thanatos in mythology is death. I can't remember if we've gotten that exact comp in the Maasverse, but in mythology, Thanatos is a personification of death. Right. So Umbra Mortis being shadow of death, he has a shadow of Thanatos's power. And we haven't seen it yet. I don't think we've seen it yet, but I do think that all works and is building towards something that we haven't gotten yet. Okay, so now I think that leads quite nicely into our next question, which is,
right, Abby, why is Hunt sensitive to the power of the mask, but seemingly not the horn?
All right, guys, this one's going to be shorter. Don't worry. All right, so
I have very short response to this.
Well, yeah. I mean, when Hunt sees the mask, he says, "What the fuck is that thing?" As if he could sense the ancient depthless power leaking from the mask in Nesta's hands. That is Crescent City 3, Chapter 77. That in and of itself is not really that crazy a thing. We know that people are sensitive to the mask. We know that people are sensitive to items of the trove. A lot of people who come into contact with items of the trove have a reaction to it. What's crazy, though, is that he has been around the horn for 3 books now, and not once did he sense any presence of the horn, right? So whatever his magic is, it seems to be directly attuned to the mask for whatever reason, right? At no point, and to be fair, he never met Bryce before she had the horn in her back. So maybe he's like, this is just how Bryce is. Like this, they are one and the same, you know, this is just what her power was. But it does seem to be that he has a specific kind of affinity for the mask, perhaps. And this is before him and Bryce have done their thing and she passed her maid essence to him in any way, right? So this is just him as Hunt. We do know also, I want to add, that Rune was attracted to the horn in Bryce's back, right? So we get that line in Crescent City 1 that whenever Rune went to look for the horn, he ended up on Bryce's doorstep, basically, right? So we know that some people have an affinity for the horn. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I do think it's fair. It's fair to say, in my opinion, that on Midgard, very few people have even taken note to the horn. Like Vesperus and Nesta in Prythian are like, you're made. You got a horn in your back. But on Midgard, it's like Rune has an affinity for the horn and like Micah. And like,
well, Micah figures it out, but Micah, I don't think sensed it. Yeah.
So the majority of people don't notice the horn on Midgard. How would they respond to the mask?
Hunt is not the only one in that scene, right? We get Isaiah and we get Celestina and Naomi.
Yeah.
Ember and Randall are in Prythian at this point, but there are other very powerful people around, and Hunt is the only one that says, what the fuck is that thing?
Yeah. Right. It's a Helion-like reaction.
Yeah. It's a Helion-like reaction. So I had a lot more build up here. We know that he can hear the mask, but we're told that's because of Bryce's maid essence being in him, which makes sense. But the quote is, Bryce did nothing without a reason. She had left him with the mask, knowing she was headed to her death. She left it with her mate who had a little bit of her maid essence in him thanks to their lovemaking last night, which might make him capable of wielding it for just enough. She had given him everything for Midgard for him. So Hunt jumps into the portal after Bryce in a mech suit that's being piloted by Shahar's soul. But when he starts running out of oxygen, he puts on the mask. The quote we get is, Hunt did the only thing he could think to do. He slid the mask onto his face. To escape death, he donned its trappings, the Umbra Mortis in truth, right? So I think this is interesting. We talked about the Umbra Mortis not 5 minutes ago, right? But here she is making the parallel between Hunt's nickname of Umbra Mortis and then wearing this mask. It is a death mask, right? So he is the shadow of death, and now he is wearing a death mask. It feels like there might be something more going on here. I also want to point out, we've also never seen anyone put on the mask to survive. Right? Hunt is putting on this mask to live, basically, right? He thinks it's saving his life. We saw Nesta do it, but Nesta did it to raise the dead.
Yeah.
Hunt is doing it just to live. I mean, I guess it's similar with Nesta because when Nesta puts it on, she can breathe underwater and she's okay. But Hunt is not planning to, well, he doesn't accept that Bryce is dead, which we'll talk about later. But he's not using it for its like intended purpose is what I would say here. He's just using it so he can breathe in space. The mask does fuck him up. Right. So the quote is, the mask ripped apart his soul, life and death. That was all that space the universe really was. But that chasm yawning wide, so close to Bryce and Brygelus, that was death incarnate. Right. So it does. We are told if you are not made, if you are not starborn, the mask will rip apart your soul. That happens to Hunt, right? So I'm not saying he's made or starborn here. I'm just saying he seems to have an unusual affinity for it. And then we know he can also hear the mask. So we get, and then Bryce was before him, her hair floating like she was underwater, face crusted, frozen, unconscious. The mask said a different word, but he ignored it, and reached. Time still so fucking slow. And then we get the Asteri were gone. Hunt was out of the mech suit in a heartbeat, shattering the metal panel, swinging down to where Bryce lay on the ground. She wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, and he finally let the mask say that word he'd been ignoring since he grabbed her in the depths of space. Dead. So he hears the mask. We don't know if anyone could hear the mask if they put it on, but he does hear the mask, even though it's ripping apart his soul. The mask also tumbles off his face, no problem. I just want to point this out. Once Bryce dies, so we get, but it did not respond like one final fuck you. The mask tumbled off his face as if her maid essence had faded from him with her death. And I just want to remind everyone what Amryn said the mask would do in A Court of Silver Flames is most of those who have worn it could never remove it. In order to sever it, they had to be beheaded. It's the cost of the power. You can raise an army of the dead to conquer the world, but you can never be free of the mask. So when Bryce dies and her maid essence in him dies with him, I would think that would be the mask is like stuck to his face forever based off the Amryn quote, but instead it just tumbles off his face. So I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was an oopsie or whatever. But so let's talk about the mask a little. The power of the mask is said to be death. So the quotes we have for that, these are both in Crescent City 3, Chapter 16. This is Nesta talking to Bryce. You detected a sentience in the mask. Bryce nodded. It didn't like talk to me or anything. I could just sense it. What did it feel like? Nesta asked quietly. Like death, Bryce breathed. Like death incarnate. Nesta's eyes grew distant, grave. That's what the mask can do. Give its wearer power over death itself. And I just think this is interesting, right? Because we just talked about the idea of Hunt's power actually being a resurrection power that we haven't seen yet. And now we have a mask that's kind of doing the same thing, but not as powerfully as it seems like Hunt could do it with a necromancer, right? Like, because the mask never fully resurrects someone, right? We haven't seen the mask fully bring someone back to life, but Hunt's power, when combined with a necromancer, if his lightning can hold souls, maybe could do it. Like, possibly could do it. I don't know. I just think it's interesting. We also have this quote. This is Crescent City 3, Chapter 52. They have a thing called the mask, a tool that can literally raise the dead. No necromancers needed, no fresh bodies either. They all stared at her. Really? Therian asked. Bryce nodded gravely. I saw the mask used to animate a skeleton that had been dead for ages. Ages, right? This is the creature that fights the worm, and give it enough strength that it could take on the worm. He refrained from complaining that she hadn't mentioned it until now, because he certainly wasn't mentioning how Rigelus had taken his lightning to do something similar, and Baxian thankfully didn't say anything either. They'd heard nothing about what had come of it, but it couldn't be good. So Sarah is directly drawing a parallel right now between Hunt's power and the power of the mask with the resurrection, right? So I definitely think we're headed in this direction. So kind of where I'm going with all this, we have one more quote. Hunt rubbed at his frozen face. And what, you're just going to have a bunch of wings flying around? This is when Bryce saying what she's going to do with the mask is raise the fallen. She caught him a sharp look. No, well, yes, but only to get them to where we need their souls. You said the mask can reanimate dead bodies, not give souls new ones. That's what I saw Nesta do, Bryce said. But Thea's star, this, Bryce said, face glowing in the starlight, seems to recognize the mask somehow. When I put the mask on, I could feel the pull between the two powers. Maybe it's something about Thea's star. I think it can command the mask to do different things. This isn't time to experiment, Hunt warned. I know, Bryce conceded, but I think all it would take was a bit of the deceased and I could make them anew. Not give them true life, but their souls would be returned, given new forms, unlike what the Asteri did to the Harpy. So now we have souls involved too, right? And we know that Thanatos refers to himself as Prince of Souls. He's known as Death in mythology, and Hunt is the shadow of death. I have a theory in here that maybe the mask was actually molded from Thanatos' face, because we know that Thanatos is on Prythian potentially, right? So yeah, I don't know that I actually want to go that far now that I'm speaking about it out loud, because I do firmly think the mask is an Asteri thing. However, I think because Hunt's power is going towards this being able to raise souls, hold souls, and raise the dead thing that we haven't seen yet, that the affinity might be in the similarities of their power, which is interesting because the mask is now back on Prythian, right? So if we need this power in Crescent City, is Hunt going to be kind of like the stand-in for it? Is Hunt going to be the source of it? I don't know.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. One, I think I don't care about anymore, but I did have a note that was like, all of the times that we have the mask in Crescent City are after Nesta wore it, and God fucking knows what power Nesta had when she wore the mask. Like, she clearly has something else, right? Like something in addition to whatever allows her to wield that mask. She has the power, like literal power of death. So in a way, she's kind of like, she might be similar to Hunt in this camp, right? In that she has death power and she also has wielded the mask, or has worn the mask. But the mask has just always felt different, right? It always felt like it might have been created differently, created with somebody else. I don't know. Like it's said to have been molded in the face of a long forgotten king. Like, that's not very Asteri created. Like, that's not Vesperus, right? Well, like, who's the king?
Bryce then kind of retcons this, because she says Bryce ran her thumbs over the mask's smooth brow. It looked like a death mask for some long dead king, which is what Amryn said. But then, had it been crafted around the mold of some Asteri's face, fashioned after the hateful visage of a Daglin in that other world. I think it's interesting that this has now been brought up twice, and we do not know whose face this was. I think we've speculated it was Fionn. I don't really think it was Fionn anymore.
Yeah.
I think we're meant to question if it was a Daglin with that line. Like, was it molded after an Asteri's face, or was it molded after someone else's face? And is that why these powers feel so hell-like, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, they do. I guess that's what I'm getting at. They do feel hell-like. And the fact that this, maybe it's an oopsie that it just fell off of Hunt's face, but the fact that it fell off of Hunt's face feels noteworthy. Like Hunt was like, I'm done with this now. And it just
And
right
when Nesta wears the mask, right, her eyes glow silver, and we know her power of silver flames. There's heavy connotations that her silver flames being so cold they burn. We think those are very hell-like powers, right? Because of larger things in the Maasverse, etc. But that doesn't happen. Bryce's eyes don't turn silver. Bryce's eyes don't turn anything when she wears the mask, right? And Hunt's eyes don't turn anything, even though he is an actual son of hell. Hunt's eyes don't turn anything at all when he wears the mask. So I don't really know.
And it's interesting that it's Hunt and Helion, right? Like, yeah, those are the two.
Right. Helion seems very starborn. However, the first 3 letters of his name are Hell. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really have anything additional.
All right. So that was a big could be something, could be nothing question. But but good to talk about. All right. Next one, Ronnie. Why is Hunt compared to a god so many times?
Yes, he is compared to a god so many times. I don't even think I got all of them, but I think I got a lot of the fun ones. So Hunt is compared to a god quite a few times, often an avenging god. We'll call out a few references, and directly connected to a frieze that we have discussed several times of a stormy fae forging a sword. And Bryce asks, long lost relative? And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about all of it. And he's also, by the way, born of a project called Project Thur, which is the name of a near forgotten storm god. So let's discuss. Hunt is compared to a god many times. I'll just click through a couple. So House of Sky and Breath, chapter 31. Wreathed in lightning from wingtip to toe, Hunt landed beside Bryce so hard the earth shuddered. The power rolling off him sent Bryce's hair floating upward. Primal rage poured from Hunt as he faced down the shepherd, the Reapers. She'd never seen anything of the sort. Hunt was the heart of a storm personified. The lightning around him turned blue like the hottest part of a flame. An image blasted through her mind. She'd seen this before, carved in stone in the lobby of the CCB. Crescent City Ballet. A fey male posed like an avenging god, hammer raised to the sky, a channel for his power. Hunt unleashed his lightning at the shepherd, the reapers observing with wide eyes. Bryce was too fast even for him as she leapt in front of the blow. Star sword extended. And this is where Hunt's lightning hit the star sword. So that frieze, I'll just jump to it. It was going to be the closer, but we'll just do it now. The frieze at the ballet is dangled in front of our faces. Okay. This is House of Sky and Breath, chapter 1, very first chapter. Bryce arched a brow, grateful for the change of subject, and twisted toward where he pointed. If this is your first episode, welcome. We've read this quote many times. If it's not, I apologize that you're hearing this quote for probably the 7th time.
No, I love it so much.
On it, a powerful fey male stood poised above an anvil, hammer raised skyward in one fist, lightning cracking from the skies, filling the hammer and flowing down toward the object of the hammer's intended blow, a sword. Its label read simply, Unknown Sculptor, Palmyra, circa 125 VE. So very old. 15,000 years old, basically. Bryce lifted her mobile and snapped a photo, pulling up her messaging thread with Hunt Athalar better at Sunball than I am. She couldn't deny that. They'd gone to a local Sunball field one sunny afternoon last week to play, and Hunt had promptly wiped the floor with her. He changed his name in her phone on the way home. Thank you for that detail, Bryce. With a few sweeps of her thumbs, the picture zoomed off into the ether along with her note, long lost relative of yours. So between these two quotes, right, we're starting off strong, okay? We get Bryce directly seeing Hunt and saying, hey, you look like this guy in this frieze that looks like a storm god. And then we get the frieze where she sees it and sends it to Hunt and is like, is this a long lost relative of yours? And what is he doing in this frieze? He appears to be forging a sword. So we have postulated on this podcast before, and I'm trying to remember which episode it was. Was it Apollyon?
I think it was Apollyon and Thanatos, yeah.
We've postulated that this...
Actually, I think it was in our ACOTAR season. I think it was all the way back in Places of Prythian.
Well, yeah. I think we first were like, is this Fion, which would be crazy.
Yeah.
But I feel pretty good about this, at least. I shouldn't say I feel pretty good about this. I feel okay about this being Thur. We have
Yes.
postulated that this might be Apollyon, which he also has, obviously, Hellfire as very clear power of his. We've gotten it in front of our faces before. So to me, at least Thur, possibly Apollyon as well. And we have talked about that. And that is a plug for maybe just like start an ACOTAR season and listen through. I don't know. I think it's a good time.
The key about this frieze that we're not going to get into here, but as a teaser, is that this same frieze is in Prythian. Selene also carves this in Prythian, right? So it's important. It's important to this story. We don't know its full history yet, but it is important to the story somehow. And the name of the frieze is the making of the sword. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, in the carvings in Prythian, there is a carving that looks exactly like the Spey Mail, and Bryce calls it out specifically. She's like, it looks like the frieze in the Crescent City Ballet, so it's clearly linked to Prythian, so it all gets very interesting. Anyways, back to Hunt being referred to as a god. Bryce is like, hey, you look like a god, like a Fey Mail posed like an avenging god, hammer raised to the sky, just like the guy carved in stone in the lobby of the Crescent City Ballet. That's it, and it sounds exactly like Thur, okay? He is also, by the way, compared to Thur. So in House of Sky and Breath chapter 43, Hunt didn't stop at destroying the suit. His lightning slammed the park trucks too, every single one of them. Bryce couldn't help but marvel at the sight of him, like a god of lightning, like Thur himself. He looked exactly like that statuette that had sat on her desk a couple weeks ago, and she had a statuette of Thur. So Bryce looks at him and is saying, you look like Thur. Seems to be a common theme here. When they are escaping the Death Charger in House of Sky and Breath chapter 44, Rune, so now we're outside of Bryce's mind, a little bit less biased, right? Rune is comparing him to a god with crown imagery, right? So lightning wrapped around Hunt's head. Rune's heart stalled a beat as it lingered, like a crown, making of Hunt an anointed primal god, willing to slaughter any in his path to save the female he loved. He'd fry every single one of them if it meant getting Bryce out alive. So now we have Rune picturing Hunt as a god as well. And then, of course, in the Depth Charger Biodome, his eyes are pure lightning. He's gone all rage days, and Bryce compares him to an avenging god. And I'll say, like, in several intimate scenes, Bryce is comparing him to an avenging god. It's like one of her favorite things to say in her own head, I think. It must be a kink. Yeah. Like, he's an avenging god. House of Sky and Breath, chapter 46. His eyes met hers, only lightning filled them, an avenging god. The star on her chest flared, merging with his lightning. He laid a hand atop it, claiming the star, the light claiming her. So he is linked to being a god, an avenging god. And I think it's interesting that it's always avenging, right? Especially considering Thur is forgotten, basically, right? Like Thur, for whatever reason, has been cast aside. Specifically when he is strongly wielding his lightning power, which to me is just linking him to Thur. Whether Thur is Apollyon or whether Thur is not Apollyon, yeah. I think he's being called an avenging god many times, called a god many times, because Hunt is descendant, linked, blessed by, second coming of, etc., to Thur. And his creation is directly linked to Project Thur, right? We talked about this already in this episode, but his father, his biological father, ran Project Thur. And that is what led him to the Princes of Hell. That's what led him to Hunt's creation. He was literally born of Project Thur. So that's not a very complex answer. And I'm sorry if you were expecting more, but Hunt...
Me or the listeners?
Everyone. I think that we're being led to a Thur is actually what Apollyon once embodied on Midgard. I like that theory more than just like Thur's some forgotten god that has blessed Hunt. But yeah, I think that's why. That's it. That's what I got. What do you have?
So I think the question is basically, is all of this Thur foreshadowing just building towards the Project Thur reveal? Or is there something else going on here? If it is building towards the Project Thur reveal, I personally think that's kind of lame. I would rather Thur be kind of an important character. The Apollyon idea, basically, to kind of walk us through, is when Bryce is walking through the caves in Prythian, she says one of the carvings that Selene made was so similar to the depiction of the frieze in the Crescent City Ballet that Bryce practically froze, right? This carving is on Prythian, and we know that this frieze is called the making of the sword. That's why this is important. There's only one sword that has been important to this story so far, and that is the Star Sword. And we know that Thea assisted in the making of the Star Sword, but we do not know who forged the Star Sword, right? So I saw this frieze. It's been connected to Hunt so much. We know that Hunt's hellfire comes from Apollyon, and now we have an image of someone with a bunch of lightning forging a sword that we know was forged on Prythian. So my kind of idea of Thur here, potentially, and we've talked about this before, but just as a refresher, just to kind of put a bow on this theory, is that Apollyon was in Prythian at one point, right? I don't think he was in Midgard. I mean, he might have been in Midgard, but Apollyon was on Prythian at one point in time, disguised himself as a minor storm deity, forged the Star Sword. Then Thea did whatever she did to imbue it with starborn power too, right? To make it, because this is important. Hunt, when he is talking about whether or not he's made by the princes of hell, he says, I was made by these bastards, but it's not a capital M, right? So it's not a capital M make with the princes of hell. So in order for the Star Sword to be made, because we know capital M made means Asteri, it needs to have some kind of starborn or Asteri power put into it. So it can't just have been Apollyon. So did Apollyon kind of disguise himself as a minor storm deity in Prythian? And then we have that line from Bryce about the Fae of Prythian bringing their gods over to Midgard too, right? So my thinking is that Apollyon was in Prythian as a minor storm deity, made the Star Sword, disguised himself, right? Made the Star Sword. When those Prythian Fae crossed over to Midgard, they brought Thur as a deity over with them, which is why this statue from Palmyra is from 125 BE, right? That's why it's almost 15,000 years old, because it was brought over from Prythian. And then Thur has been kind of forgotten, but this link between Hunt and Thur is actually a link between Hunt and Apollyon. And the reason why we haven't gotten the reveal yet is because we don't know that Apollyon has been on Prythian yet, right? That's why this would work, because the piece of the puzzle that's missing here is Prythian rather than the Hunt reveal as Apollyon's father. It's that Apollyon was on Prythian as a minor storm deity is what I think might be happening here, but that is a lot. And again, guys, sorry, I didn't get into this much because we've gone into this theory in depth in other episodes. So if you want to hear the full thing, listen to our other episode.
Start earlier. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
Yeah. The other option here is that Thur is a real deity and Hunt has some connection here that we haven't, that door hasn't even been opened yet. But that would be pretty crazy if he was both a son of princes of hell and somehow connected to a god.
This is crazy. But I think it's more likely that hell is kind of a farce, because I'm not convinced we've seen hell. That actually what we are told is hell is a god realm and Apollyon is just like one of the gods, because Apollo is a god, right? Like Apollo is very much a god. I think it's more likely that Apollyon is Thur, and maybe just like hell is not what we are told hell is, then Hunt is actually son of a god, son of hell, and also like an Asteri cocktail as well.
That's so interesting, because the Vesperus line, the Bryce to Vesperus line, where Vesperus says, well, no. But Vesperus says, who is this Apollyon you speak of? And Bryce says, we call them demons, but you may know them as some other name, right? We've always interpreted that line as being something Throne of Glass related. But is she specifically saying, hey, Apollyon might also go by a different name? That name might be Thur.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. That'd be interesting. That would be interesting.
And this is not our next spoiler section, but there are other gods, guys. I know we're not super heavy on gods in Crescent City and ACOTAR, but Throne of Glass is. So that's a plug. Read Throne of Glass.
That's a plug. All right.
Are we good to move on?
We are good.
All right, Abby, what are the implications of Hunt's name being Orion?
So we are given an explanation for this. I want to be clear about this. We are given an explanation in the books, and I do think the explanation works, but let's talk through it. So Apollyon tells us that he basically chose the name Hunt, right? So quote we have is, yes, Apollyon said, then added to Hunt, your name was a nod to that whispered in your mother's ear as you were born, Orion, Master of Sirius. And the reason why Master of Sirius works is because Apollyon, who is his father, killed the Asteri named Sirius. So what's interesting in our world, right? You look skeptical. It's
not actually like, or Orion does not actually master Sirius, right? Like Sirius is just a star in, like it's loose.
Well, this is what's interesting is that where this comes from is the Iliad, right? So in the Iliad, the star Sirius is mentioned as Orion's dog, which means the Iliad exists in Crescent City. Also, does this confirm that the Princes of Hell like to attend births? Because we've talked about the Princes of Hell potentially being at another birth. And here Apollyon is saying is your name was whispered in your mother's ear as you were born. In that moment, as you were born, we whispered in your mother's ear. So it's very interesting. All right, let's just briefly talk about Orion in mythology. So we have a couple. This is disgusting. I'm going to preface this with, I don't know what's wrong with the ancient Greeks, but this story is vile.
All of them are bad. Yeah. All of the
Them are
options.
bad. So there are a couple different versions of Orion's birth, but the one I find most interesting references Curious, and the reason I find that interesting is because Hunt's father in these books is also named Curious. So this is from Wikipedia. So the story is the gods Zeus, Hermes, and Poseidon came to visit Curious of Tanagra, who roasts a whole bull for them. When they offer him a favor, he asks for a son. The gods take the bull's hide and urinate into it and bury it in the earth. 10 lunations later, Curious digs up a hole and finds the infant Orion. So, I mean, that kind of works, but we've removed the bull and the peeing piece of it, etc. And then in other versions, he is a giant, the son of Poseidon, and has the ability to walk on water. He is known as the Hunter, hence the nickname Hunt in this story. So this is from Greek Legends and Mythstock. As an adult, Orion arrived on the large of Jesus Christ. I don't know. As an adult, Orion arrived on an island and then fell in love with Merope, the daughter of a king. To prove his worth, Orion set about hunting down the animals to present on Chios, and even became the first to develop the skill of hunting at night to bag a huge collection of animals. It did not matter what he did, though. The king had no wish to see Orion become his son-in-law. We know that Athalar is very skilled at hunting down demons. Like, he is a demon hunter, right? So this also works with our version of Hunt. He ends up blinded, so a frustrated Orion would take matters into his own hands because the king did not allow him to marry his daughter and forced himself on Merope. The king then sought retribution. He gained the assistance of Dionysus, his father-in-law, and Orion was placed into a deep sleep, at which point the king blinded Orion. The blind Orion was then abandoned upon one of the beaches of Chios. So he assaults Merope, which we don't like, and obviously our Hunt has never done that. But I think what's interesting is that this Orion in mythology ends up blinded, and we have the oracle's line to Hunt about staying away from Bryce, and we know that Bryce's manifestation as of her starlight at first was just being able to blind people, right? So the story is kind of weaving in there. However, his eyesight is later restored when he sees the first light of the rising sun. So this is not fatal to him. His eyesight is restored. Orion later makes his way to Crete, where he becomes a companion of Artemis. Companionship of Artemis would ultimately lead to the death of Orion, although various different tales were told of how the son of Poseidon came to die. So I have at least 5 different versions of his death here. So version 1, Orion boasted of his hunting ability and proclaimed that he would hunt every animal to be found on Earth. These words greatly upset Gaia, who sent forth a giant scorpion to stop Orion. The scorpion would overcome the giant, killed by the poisonous sting. Version 2, Eos, the dawn goddess, saw the handsome Orion in the company of Artemis and decided to abduct the giant. Artemis killed Orion when she found her companion with Eos upon the island of Delos. Version 3, Artemis was said to have killed Orion because he started paying attention to one of her handmaidens and she got jealous, so she killed him. Version 4, Artemis killed Orion when the hunter had the affront to challenge her to a game of quoits. So he challenged her to a game. She said, "Who do you think you are?" She killed him. And then version 5, Apollo arranged the death of Orion when he became jealous of the closeness of Orion and his sister Artemis. When Orion was swimming far out to sea, Apollo challenged Artemis to hit a bombing target. Artemis, of course, found her mark, unaware that it was the head of her companion. So most versions of his death center around Artemis, which I think is interesting. I know a lot of people have said, hey, Hunt dies in every version of his story in mythology. And he does. That's true. Or Orion dies in every version of mythology. But a lot of these deaths are tied to Artemis, which I think is interesting because we've talked about this before, but basically in our Maasverse, our Artemis comp, she is a moon goddess and a hunter, right? That is kind of the 2 things about Artemis. Our comps are the Archeron sisters. Like, they are the ones with the moon imagery and with the hunting, Feyre especially. So I think it's interesting that if we're going with the mythology angle, it's not necessarily like Bryce that would lead to the demise of Hunt. And to be clear, I don't really think Hunt's going to die. I don't think Sarah would do that to us. Maybe after book 1, he would have died, but I don't think 3 books of a 4-book series, he's going to end up dead. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. So then I have more about Hunt and the Oracle, but do you want to talk about anything with the mythology?
I mean, I do think that the Artemis equivalent is interesting. Is this foreshadowing that Hunt has a concerning storyline ahead of him if he does go into Prythian? I do think that that could be interesting because we do have Feyre the Huntress. We have imagery of Artemis and the goddess of the hunt and the moon goddess throughout all of the Artron sisters. And we do have Nesta already close to Bryce. So I do think there could be interesting foreshadowing there if Sarah chooses to pull on it, especially given we have Apollyon, already in play, and like the fact that there is a death of Orion at the hands of Apollo is interesting. Like I will say it's interesting. I don't know that it necessarily needs to come true, and Sarah has not committed to deaths in the past. So even if we do have a death of Hunt, I don't know that it would necessarily last.
Right.
But I think it could turn into something.
Bryce has already died and come
Right.
back really twice. So it would be tough, A, for Hunt to die after all that, B, for Hunt to die and come back somehow. Like I would find that a tough thing to pull off.
But Feyre died and then Rhys died and
you
came
know,
back.
you're completely right. And I ate it up. So
right. Like I'm just saying that she's done it and she somehow pulls it off. So I'm simply saying that she doesn't commit to death. So I wouldn't say that Hunt, I wouldn't lay my hand on my heart and say I don't see Hunt dying, because like if we have enough foreshadowing, she could kill Hunt and she could just not commit to it. I could see that.
We spent an hour of this episode talking about how Hunt is probably able to resurrect souls. Right. Like it's right. Yeah.
It's fine.
All right. I mean, I have stuff about Hunt and the Oracle, but I honestly don't really feel the need to get into it that much. Hunt goes to visit the Oracle. All right, let's just talk about it a bit. So when Hunt goes to visit the Oracle, the first thing we get is the Sphinx blinked large brown eyes at him, lashes brushing against her light brown cheeks. Ask me your question, and I shall tell you what the smoke whispers to me. The words rumbled over his bones, luring him in. Not the way he sometimes let himself be lured in by beautiful females, but in the manner that a spider might lure a fly to its web. As a reminder, the other people we've gotten spider imagery for are Vesperus and the Weaver, right? And you could argue that the Weaver is maybe chaotic neutral, like she's not really good or bad, but Vesperus is definitely evil, right? So spider imagery is always not a great sign. She also offers to tell him what happened between her and Bryce. In the Maasverse, traditionally, when someone is offering to tell you a secret of someone else, that person is not to be trusted. And we'll get into that in our later Throne of Glass section. But Sarah has written a scene similar to this before. So the quote is, her teeth shone, her canines long enough to shred flesh. Did Bryce Quinlan tell you what occurred when she stood in the chamber 12 years ago? His blood turned to ice. That's Quinlan's business. That smile didn't falter. You do not wish to know what I saw for her either. No, he spoke from his heart. It's her business, he repeated. His lightning rose within him, rallying against a foe he could not slay. So his lightning is rallying against the Oracle, right? The Oracle had also recently told him that their discussion would be confidential. She says, yeah, anything you say here is confidential. I'm not going to tell anyone else. And now she is offering to tell him what happened with Bryce when she came to visit. So it's like, you can't really trust the Oracle at all. Like, I think she's a really slimy character. What she actually says to Hunt. So this is kind of the line that makes people think that Bryce is going to be potentially responsible for the demise of Hunt. So the quote is, before Hunt dared ask what they meant, her lion's tail, a larger version of Syrinx's, swayed over the floor. The doors behind him open on a phantom wind, his dismissal clear. But the Oracle said before stalking into the vapors, do yourself a favor, Orion Athalar. Keep well away from Bryce Quinlan. That is Crescent City 1, chapter 33. That's not great, I'll admit. But as a reminder, we know that the Oracle doesn't like Bryce because of what happened on her visit, right? So the quote is, it was catastrophic. She swallowed against the memory. When the Oracle looked into her smoke, she screamed, clawed at her eyes. There was no point hiding it. The event had been known in some circles. I heard later that she went blind for a week. Holy shit, Bryce laughed to herself. Apparently my future is that bad. Hunt didn't smile. What happened? I returned to the petitioner's antechamber. All you could hear was the Oracle screaming and cursing me. The acolytes rushed in, right? So we know the Oracle is not unbiased here, right? The Oracle really doesn't like Bryce. Interesting that the Oracle, even though we have the story of Orion being blinded, the Oracle is the one that is blinded here. So, I mean, and then it's later implied that what the Oracle saw was Bryce's starlight. we don't really have a lot of backstory on the Oracle. We don't really know where she came from, what she's like, whose agenda she's necessarily supporting. So there's not a ton here to go off of, but I wouldn't necessarily like plant a flag with her as like an unbiased, like with the Suriel, it's a little different, right? The Suriel is a little more of a trusted source, I would say. Like the Suriel helps Feyre many, many times and like doesn't seem to be that biased. And even the Suriel gets stuff wrong a lot. Like I have in here, if we want to go through it, the prophecies that the Suriel just does not get right. Like I would say prophecies in Sarah J. Maas's books are wishy-washy at best. I actually think a lot of the times the prophecies deliberately lead you in the wrong direction. So just for me,
two of the things we get from the Oracle are Cormac, right, being pushed to Bryce, like the union will bring great prosperity, which did actually work out in favor of the Fae, right? Like Cormac going to find Bryce. It's like it has so far been not what you think. Like it's been kind of what the Suriel has done, right? Like not what you think, very cryptic, but it does kind of result in ultimately what the Oracle was saying. Like you kind of were like, oh, okay. So like Cormac going to find Bryce ultimately did result in like the restoration of Avallen, and like that came out of that. And then with Rune, like the royal bloodline ending with you, he's like, the royal bloodline ends with me because I am giving up my title to Bryce, and she's gonna say fuck the Fae royal bloodline, basically. So I do think I hear what you're saying in that the Oracle might be like, we don't know much about her, she might be biased against Bryce. Totally. But I do think we have enough reason to be worried here. Not worried, but like wondering, why are you saying that? Like what is going to happen as a result of this? And maybe it's already come true because Hunt went through a lot of bad shit, right? Because he met Bryce.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
So that's like possible. It's possible that we've already seen this play out, but like the things that the Oracle has said, I believe, have generally resulted in kind of an end result that could link to what the Oracle was saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's fair. The Cormac and Rune ones are fair. I would say for Hunt, he was tortured, right? He ends up tortured in an Asteri dungeon.
In the Asteri dungeons.
Yeah.
It's totally possible this has already played out and
pretty
like,
bad.
We're done.
We're done. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think when you look at the Maasverse as a whole, like I have some of these things here, right? So the Suriel literally says, the last time Feyre consults the Suriel, she asks if she'll be able to nullify the cauldron's powers. And the Suriel says, so this is the quote, is there another spell to use to nullify its powers? If there were such a thing, you would still have to get close enough to the cauldron to do it. Hybern will not make that mistake twice. But Feyre does get close enough to the cauldron to nullify its powers, right? Like she gets there and it's okay. So that is like, I would say another prophetic being who this just wasn't true. Like this just didn't come out. And we also know, and I know some of you are going to say, oh, we just haven't seen that come through yet. But we have Elaine's Cassian prophecy, right? So Elaine says to Cassian, he snapped your wings, broke your bones. It'll take more than that to kill me, Cassian said with a smirk that didn't meet his eyes. Elaine only said to Cassian, no, it will not. In the final battle against Hybern, the king of Hybern snaps his wings. So we have not 20 feet away. Cassian was still on the ground, wings snapped in spots, blood leaking from them. And the king of Hybern breaks his bones. We have the king of Hybern stood over him and extended a hand. Cassian arched off the ground, bellowing in pain. A bone cracked somewhere up his body, right? So it seems like this is the moment that Elaine was talking about. He snapped your wings, broke your bones. But then Elaine shows up and saves Cassian's life. So it is once again a prophecy that does not really line up with the events of the later book. So I totally agree with you on the Oracle. Like what she has said has been tricky but right. But I don't think we can take everything that prophetic beings say in the Maasverse as Bible.
Yeah. I'll talk about, I will certainly talk way more about the Oracle next week, but she says she's limited. She says things are veiled. So I also think that matters. Like, and it's like the Suriel, right? The Suriel says things are veiled too. And so does Elaine. So every prophetic being also has things that they can't see. And I think that matters. So,
I mean, she says the thing that can be used to heal the horn is veiled, right? Yeah. And it's just synth. Like, why would synth be veiled? I understand from a story perspective why it's veiled, but from a powers perspective, like, unless it's black salt, which could be, in which case it would make sense that maybe she can't see Hunt's future that well either. But she does say to Hunt, you remind me of that which was lost long ago, right? So she seems to know that Hunt is part Thunderbird, but whether she knows that he also has that connection to Hell, I think is an open question. Anyway, That is all I have on this one. Do you have anything else? All right, cool. All right, so next we are going to go into our Throne of Glass Omissions section. So if you have not read all 8 books in the Throne of Glass series and you do not want to be spoiled, we recommend that you leave now. We are very much on social media. We have a Discord. Everything will be linked for you guys in the show notes. So if you're not already following, we would love it if you followed along. We're doing a lot on social media and Discord right now. It's really fun. And sometimes we're even talking about stuff that doesn't make it to the episode. So kind of some extra stuff there. All right. Throne of Glass Omissions in 3, 2, 1. Do you want to go first?
I mean, we basically got to it, but like Nesta has silver flames, seems to have Diana's power. Diana is the Roman equivalent of Artemis. Like, is this foreshadowing that Nesta willingly or unwillingly is going to pose a threat to Hunt?
Yeah. I don't know.
Potentially. I don't know. It seems like unwillingly, right? Because Artemis is tricked by Apollo. Yeah. So she could be an unwilling weapon against Hunt. I also think it would be really interesting. Like Diana is Diana Triformis, right? So she also has Luna and how do you say Hecate?
Hecate?
Sure.
I don't know.
So Elaine is like the most likely sleeper threat, unintentional weapon at this point, in my opinion. So does Hunt have threats on Prythian? I think that would be a very interesting plot point because we have Deanna so closely linked to the Archerons and Nesta in particular, who is already close to Bryce.
Or just Deanna herself. Is Deanna herself going to show up and try to fuck up Hunt? Like, that would be fun, too.
Yeah. Deanna seems like she's got her grubby little fingers in every single world so far. Lunathian, Prythian, and Aurelia. So, and Hell maybe. So we'll see.
We'll see. All right. I have a COSM. So turn your Hunt brain off for a second. I have a COSM. I wanted to read these during both of our Bryce episodes, but they were getting really long, so I didn't. So this is from Courtney on Instagram, and it is one of my favorite COSMs we've ever gotten. So Courtney writes, I don't know if you've touched on this, but in my current reread of Empire of Storms, I came across a passage that made me about die and made a connection that I am calling the Mayfly theory. It's basically that the Throne of Glass gods are Asteri, but there is textual evidence to back it up. So quote 1. In Empire of Storms, chapter 65, while Aelin and Manon were in the mirror, they watched the past unfold during the use of the lock by Elena. During that story, the TOG gods were described as they were as mighty and vast and eternal as a human was to a mayfly. They had not been born in this world. Perhaps they had become trapped here after wandering through a word gate. Upon reading this, bells started going off. This is a very obvious hint that they were not of this world, but the word mayfly also caught my attention. I knew I had heard it before and was thinking Asteri fit the bill description-wise. So I searched Kindle in my Crescent City books. Lo and behold, quote 2. House of Earth and Blood, chapter 73. Everyone rose from their seats as the Asteri came into view, and everyone knelt. Even from nearly 6,000 miles away, Hunt could have sworn their power rippled into the conference room, could have sworn it sucked out the warmth, the air, the life, as if his entire existence were but a mayfly, his power but a wisp of breeze in the face of their hurricane. It's a miracle that I didn't fall out of my chair. So I decided to check all 3 of the books across the 3 series. So I decided to check all of the books across the 3 series and see if it was ever mentioned again. The only other time was in A Court of Frost and Starlight. So this is quote 3. The mountain neared, mighty and endless, so wide that he might as well have been a mayfly in the wind. Cassian soared toward Romiel's southern face, rising high enough to catch a glimpse of the shining black stone jutting from its top. Romiel is about the most suspicious place in the ACOTAR world, a bald mountain that is undiscovered when all of the rest of them have things under them, not to mention the black stone jutting from that sounds very similar to the one in the Temple of Stone in Ilium. I don't remember the Temple of Stone in Ilium, but I trust you.
Neither
so basically, what?
Neither do I. I do not remember the Temple of Stone in Ilium.
So basically the theory is we have Mayfly used 3 times to describe the Asteri, to describe the Throne of Glass gods, and to describe Romiel, which is in a very Asteri-coded mountain. So does this word link the Asteri and the Throne of Glass gods together? I loved it. I don't know that it's definitive. I don't know. I'm not Sarah J. Maas. I can't say definitively, but I really loved the way you put this together, Courtney. I really loved it. So thank you so much. Snaps for you.
Yeah, I love it. Is the word mayfly is used to describe the human relative to the Asteri being, Right.
Yeah, because mayflies live for so short a time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I like it. I think it's fun. It's another one of those, like, is Sarah J. Maas just writing this way, or is this the definitive?
Yeah, is this
the link? Are we supposed to notice this? But yeah, I love it. I think
Yeah.
it's clever.
Yeah.
Good job, Courtney.
Good job, Courtney. I have one last omission, and then we'll do Precog. One last omission. I found the Oracle offering to tell Hunt Bryce's future very, very, very analogous to Baba Yellowlegs offering to tell Aelin what Dorian asked her, right? And that is kind of why my alarm bells are going off with the Oracle and saying, this is not a character that we should be trusting. To me, I have found her very nefarious, especially with the spider imagery too. But it just seems like very parallel scenes. And obviously the Baba Yellowleg scene came first, right? So that's what I was referencing before. I think you guys probably picked up on it, but just to make it crystal clear.
Yep.
Yep.
Not good. Not good.
All right. Precog corner. You want to go first?
Sure. All right. Big, could be something, could be nothing. But I would really love it if this were true. I would think it's really fun. So this is about when Bryce lands in Prithian, and she's having her interaction with Amryn, Rhys, and Asriel, and she's conversing with Rhys and Amryn in the old language of the Fae, and Rhys is trying to be like as cordial as he can be and just kind of introduce themselves, and he introduces people by name, and then Bryce shares hers. So Rhysand snapped his fingers and 3 chairs appeared behind them. He sank gracefully onto one, crossing an ankle over a knee, the epitome of Fae beauty and arrogance. He glanced up at his companions. Asriel, he motioned lazily to the male, then to the female, Amryn. Then he motioned to Bryce and said neutrally, Bryce, ... Quinlan. Bryce nodded slowly. I'm wondering, based on the fact that we get said neutrally and an ellipsis between Bryce and Quinlan, whether Rhys recognizes Quinlan.
Yeah.
Somehow, like recognizes the name Quinlan, because we get so few family names in ACOTAR very intentionally. So I looked into what the last name Quinlan actually means, the name Quinlan, and it means descended from handsome man, which is very specific, right? So at first thought you think like Rhys, which would be really weird, right? But then I can't help but think of Helllloooooo, who has kind of the brand of handsome player in this series. So this is based off of basically nothing, right? But does Rhys recognize Quinlan as Hellioon's family name? And is he trying to keep his face neutral or recognize it as anybody's family name? I think any of it would be sick if like he knew the name Quinlan and was trying to like mask it. But he's saying so much in this scene, quote, neutrally, clearly trying to like hold a reaction. And when he says things neutrally, it's talking about scary shit in her world. And I just think it's very interesting that Sarah chose to say neutrally, Bryce, ... Quinlan. Like, why is her name something that he needs to say neutrally? Does he recognize it? Could it be a family name that he recognizes on Prithian?
I love it. I don't know either. But yeah, it does. That ellipsis does hold a lot of weight. Yeah. I love it. It'd be really funny if Hellioon's last name was Quinlan. That would just be it'd be like the end of How's the Sky of Breath, right? You just throw the book across the room. You're like, what do I do here? What do I do with my emotions?
Pegasi. At first I was like, it would be wild if this were Rhys's last name, because it's like kind of silly and we know that his last name is kind of silly. But then I was like, I feel like it's not. Like I feel like he would have a reaction that he could not mask if it were Rhys's last name.
Yeah, and Feyre, I feel like would also not like. Well, I guess I don't know.
We don't know. Feyre was there yet.
Yeah. Well, Feyre, isn't this at the beginning of book 3, and Feyre meets Bryce at the end of book 2? But I don't know if she's revealed her last name.
I don't think she had come in yet. I will verify, but I don't think she had come.
No, it doesn't matter that much. You don't need to verify.
But yeah. I don't know. We don't need to attach it to a person. I think descended from handsome man could be any of the High Lords.
Anyone.
Any of the High Lords.
Anyone.
Could be great. But because Helllloooooo has the Pegasi, seems to be like the other Starborn somehow, and also kind of looks similar to Ember. It would be fun if it were Helllloooooo.
Yeah.
All right, what's yours?
I did. I realized this is going to be kind of a visual Precog, so I'll do my best to describe it. So I was doing a kind of deep dive on Sarah J. Maas's Instagram the other day for a different episode that we're going to record. That's a plug for Dragons After Dark, by the way. And she had a post on her Instagram about there being Easter eggs in the covers of all of the Crescent City novels, which I think we knew, but she was like very much like, no, there are Easter eggs. And she also mentioned that House of Sky and Breath cover is definitively Hunt. Like that is Hunt on the cover. It's meant to be Hunt. So I thought it would be fun if I kind of went through this cover and saw what I could see, right? So mentally picture House of Sky and Breath cover if you can. This is one of those things we'll post on Patreon, though, guys. Like, I've gone through it. I've taken screenshots. So I'll do my best to explain it orally. But if you want the visual, that will be on Patreon. So first thing I noticed, Hunt has a sword in the middle of his chest, right? It's either a sword or a dagger, but there is a sword in the middle of his chest, which is interesting because we haven't gotten Hunt associated with a sword yet. It also does not appear to be the Star Sword because it doesn't appear to be black, right? It appears to be silver. So I think this is curious. I don't know which sword this is. Is it either a sword? Is it possibly that sword that Thur maybe forged that we've seen the making of the sword? Is it that sword? Or is this a sword that we have not met yet? I will say it also doesn't appear to be Truth Teller. There's no runes on it, and it's also not black. So I don't think it's Truth Teller or the Star Sword. There is a wolf's face right above the sword. So we have a profile of a wolf's face right above the sword. I think that's interesting. We don't have that much wolf imagery with Hunt, so maybe this is just a reference to Danica within the story. We also know the prime of the Valbaran Fae refers to Bryce as a wolf, which we've never really talked about, but I thought maybe we'll talk about that in our wolves episode. But could this be referencing Bryce or Danica potentially? There's also 2 Pegasi on either side of the wolves, which is a nice... You're going to, obviously, when you read this, you think it's Jelly Jubilee. And then in Crescent City 3, we find out, no, that's actually Pegasi. We also get, and this one I thought was really interesting. On Hunt's wings, we have a lunar cycle. So we have the complete cycle of the moon, which I think is interesting for a couple reasons. One, we talked about the Artemis mythology to Orion in mythology, and she is the Greek goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and the moon. However, this also matches Feyre's bargain tattoo with the bone carver, right? And we have not talked about the death gods at all in this episode, but we have talked about Nesta having the power of death, and we have talked about Hunt being a shadow of death, right? And potentially having a resurrection power. Is this Easter egg telling us that Hunt might also be somehow tied to the death gods because of Feyre's tattoo with a death god? I don't know. I thought that was interesting. There's lightning. That seems pretty self-explanatory. And then Hunt in this cover is holding a small snake. In the House of Flame and Shadow cover, the woman on the cover, who is probably Bryce, but we don't know for sure, is being practically engulfed by a snake, right? She is like, do you think it's Lydia? I'm okay if it's Lydia. It doesn't matter who the woman on the cover is for this theory.
I kind of thought it was, well, I don't know. I don't want to speak off the cuff. Off the cuff, I actually thought it was more of an Erd figure because of the tree.
Yeah, the tree. It's really interesting. Yeah. But the tree, which might be, I think Yggdrasil is how you pronounce it. It's very heavily Norse mythology inspired. This ties into that, right? So Hunt is holding a small snake on this cover. If it's the same snake on the next cover, it is much bigger and much more powerful. We have talked about all the kind of references, offhand references to Jormungandr and to Norse mythology. As a reminder, Ragnarok, which is the end of the world, also I believe called Twilight of the Gods, which was Sarah's Pinterest board that she deleted that has sparked thousands and thousands of fan theories, was called Twilight of the Gods. But Ragnarok begins when Jormungandr, basically, who is the serpent that encircles the world and is biting its own tail, releases its tail from its mouth. So we're getting some kind of heavy potential Ragnarok imagery in this, which I think is fun. Could be leading to something in book 4. And then his hair is floating on a phantom wind. We've just got that phantom wind again, which I love. But that's all I really had. That's all I could really find.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to look at it full size.
There's also a lot of crescent moons throughout.
Yeah,
but I don't have many thoughts on that.
I mean, there's even more wolves in his wings. Like, there's a profile of a wolf. There's a lot of wolves facing each other. which is so interesting.
Well, the question is this all Hunt imagery or is this just Easter eggs for what happens in book 2? Because the Ethan storyline obviously picks up in book 2. But no mare imagery, like nothing for Therion.
Yeah. And he seems to be sitting on a throne.
All right, well, hold on. Now I need to look at that.
Like what's behind him seems
I think those are his wings.
No. The pillar behind him.
Interesting. You don't think that's just the same tree thing? It almost looks like bones too, like the things around them. Well, he is a prince. He is a son of 2 princes. Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful cover.
Yeah, gorgeous cover. Oh, I like
all
it.
right, that is all I had. Did you have anything?
I already went.
Yep, you already went. And I loved yours. All right. That is it from us this week. You can find us on social media. We are Dragons in the Details Pod on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have a server. It is Dragons in the Details server. As Ronnie likes to say, it is always popping off. Literally always theories happening there. It's a great spot if you're looking to chat theories. As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we are launching a Patreon very soon. Oh, no, sorry. When this episode comes out, we will have launched a Patreon, so we will have a link to that in our show notes. If you like us, if you like what we do, please always remember to leave a review. Reviews on Apple Podcasts especially are really helpful for us. Mm-hmm. If things aren't working, let us know in Apple reviews too. We do read them. Someone left a comment that our ads were playing too loudly. We don't have control over that, guys. I want to let you know that Spotify puts the ads in and we have no idea what volume those are going to be, but I'm going to try to tinker with it. I'm going to try to make our episodes louder to match the ads. So we're going to work on it. We're always taking what you say to heart, and we're going to try to do our best to make it as accommodating as possible. So, or email us, just let us know if something's not working. We're always happy to try to fix it. That is it from us this week. Next week, we are talking Hunt, Bryce, and Azriel. And again, I just want to be clear, I am firmly in the camp that Hunt and Bryce are mates, but we're going to talk about it because there's some interesting things going on there. That is it from us this week. Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.